The wedding veil wasn't meant for her head, it was meant for her throat. In the Iron Dominion, queens don't get crowned, they get collared. And tonight, Lady Seraphina Vale would kneel before the most brutal king the Seven Territories had ever known. But she carried a secret that could burn his empire to ash. A power buried so deep, her own father sold her to the throne just to keep it hidden. This is the story of a woman who saw through lies and a king who ruled through fear. Stay until the end to see how far a monster will fall when love becomes his weakness. Drop a like and comment your city below. Let me know where my wolves are watching from. The cathedral bells rang like iron fists hammering against stone. Seraphina stood motionless in the preparation chamber while 3 servants moved around her like shadows, wrapping the silver coronation veil around her throat. Not gently. They pulled it tight enough that she felt her pulse throb against the metal threading. One of the older women, her face carved with the kind of exhaustion that came from serving tyrants, whispered without looking up. "Watch yourself in there, girl. Kings like him don't marry for love. They marry for control." Seraphina said nothing. Her hands remained still at her sides even as her heartbeat hammered against her ribs. She had learned long ago that silence was armor in places where words became weapons. The servant finished tying the veil and stepped back. The metal collar sat cold against Seraphina's skin, a reminder that in this empire, marriage wasn't partnership. It was ownership. Through the arched windows, she could see the capital sprawling beneath a blood-red sunset. Thousands had gathered in the streets, packed shoulder to shoulder beneath crimson banners that snapped in the wind like war flags. They weren't here to celebrate love. They were here to witness power. The double doors swung open. A voice like gravel announced her entrance. The Lady Seraphina Vale, bride to his eternal majesty. Alpha King Cassian Drakhar, conqueror of the 7 territories, breaker of the southern rebellions, lord of the Iron Throne. She walked. Every step echoed through the cathedral like a countdown. The aisle stretched endlessly before her, lined on both sides by noblemen in silk robes and military commanders in black armor. Their faces were masks, smiling, calculating, hungry. This was not a wedding. This was theater, a performance designed to remind everyone watching exactly who held the power and who existed to serve it. And at the end of that aisle, waiting beneath an arch of twisted black iron and blood roses, stood the man she was about to bind herself to for the rest of her life. King Cassian Drakhar. Even from a distance, he radiated something that made the air feel heavier. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, his face carved from stone. Broad shoulders. Dark hair pulled back tight. Eyes like winter's steel that tracked her approach with the focus of a predator watching prey cross an open field. The rumors about him were endless. They said he executed his own brothers to seize the throne. They said he burned entire villages for the crime of sheltering rebels. They said he could shift into his alpha form in seconds and tear through armed men like they were made of paper. They said a lot of things. But as Seraphina moved closer, she saw something the rumors never mentioned. Exhaustion. It lived in the tight line of his jaw, in the way his hands gripped each other behind his back hard enough to whiten his knuckles, in the shadows beneath his eyes that no amount of royal makeup could fully hide. This was a man who had not rested in years. She reached the altar. Cassian's gaze locked onto hers, and for one stretched moment, the entire cathedral seemed to hold its breath. Then he extended his hand, and Seraphina made the mistake of taking it. The world fractured. It didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once, like falling through ice into freezing water. 1 second she was standing in the cathedral surrounded by nobles and incense, and the next she was drowning in someone else's memories. She saw a boy kneeling beside the corpse of his mother, her throat slit open, blood pooling across white marble floors. She saw a man, his father, beating him bloody in front of the entire royal court, while noblemen watched and did nothing. She saw 3 brothers laughing around a war table covered in maps, planning to sell their kingdom piece by piece to foreign warlords in exchange for gold and safe passage out of the empire. And she saw Cassian standing over their bodies afterward, alone in a room soaked with blood, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold the blade. He hadn't killed them for power. He killed them to stop a betrayal. Deeper still, buried beneath all the violence and brutality, she saw something that nearly shattered her completely. Terror. Not fear of enemies, not fear of death, fear of becoming his father. The vision released her as suddenly as it had taken hold. Seraphina gasped, stumbling slightly. Cassian caught her elbow to steady her, his grip firm but not cruel. For one suspended heartbeat, their eyes met again. And she realized with absolute certainty that he knew. He knew she had seen him. All of him. Every buried truth, every hidden scar, every nightmare that lived behind the crown and the armor and the throne built on bones. The most powerful king alive looked afraid. Not of her. Of what she had just witnessed. The officiant's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Do you, Lady Seraphina Vale, accept this union under the laws of the Iron Dominion and pledge your loyalty to King Cassian Drakhar until death claims one or both? Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I do. And do you, King Cassian Drakhar, claim Lady Seraphina Vale as your queen and swear to protect her under the laws of the throne until death claims one or both? Cassian's answer was quieter, almost too quiet for anyone beyond the first row to hear. I do. The cathedral erupted in applause that sounded more like duty than joy. Cassian leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. His voice was low enough that only she could hear it. What did you see? Seraphina's pulse hammered against the metal collar around her throat. Everything. His jaw tightened. Then we need to talk. Tonight. After the feast. Alone. He pulled back before she could respond, turning to face the crowd with the same unreadable mask he always wore. But Seraphina had seen beneath it now, and she knew that mask was all that kept him alive. The wedding feast transformed the palace into something obscene. Gold pillars stretched towards ceilings painted with murals of ancient conquests. Velvet drapes the color of dried blood hung from every archway. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats and honeyed fruits and wine, so expensive most of the kingdom would never taste it in their entire lives. Seraphina sat beside Cassian at the high table, watching nobles gorge themselves while musicians played beside marble fountains. Laughter echoed off the walls, sharp and brittle, the kind of laughter that came from people who spent every waking moment calculating how to survive the next betrayal. A woman in emerald silk approached the table, bowing low enough to expose the dagger hidden in her bodice. Your Majesty. My lady, House Corvain offers its deepest congratulations on your union. Cassian didn't even glance at her. Accepted. The woman's smile never wavered, but Seraphina saw the flicker of rage in her eyes before she turned away. That's Lady Morelle Corvain, Cassian said quietly, cutting into the meat on his plate with surgical precision. 3 months ago, her house tried to poison the water supply in the eastern districts to frame the Southern Rebellion. I executed her father and 2 brothers. She's been waiting for an opportunity to return the favor ever since. Seraphina kept her voice low. And you let her walk free? Cassian took a bite, chewing slowly before answering. Dead enemies stay dead. Living enemies make mistakes. She'll slip eventually, and when she does, I'll have justification to wipe out the entire bloodline without starting a civil war. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Seraphina's stomach turned. How do you live like this? For the first time that night, Cassian looked at her directly. By not dying. The rest of the feast passed in a blur of forced smiles and veiled threats disguised as compliments. Nobles approached the table in waves, each one offering congratulations that felt more like warnings. Military commanders toasted the king's health, while their eyes calculated how many men it would take to storm the palace. Aristocratic women complimented Seraphina's gown while studying her like a butcher examining meat. Every conversation was a test. Every glance carried weight. By the time the final course was served, Seraphina felt like she had survived a battle. Then the doors at the far end of the hall swung open. A man entered, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing black military dress covered in medals that caught the firelight. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and controlled expression. He moved through the crowd like he owned it, soldiers stepping aside without being asked. Lord Valor Thane, Cassian said quietly. Commander of the royal armies. My oldest ally. He doesn't look like an ally. Cassian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. In this court, allies are just enemies who haven't found the right opportunity yet. Valor reached the high table and bowed, but his eyes stayed locked on Cassian. Your Majesty, forgive my late arrival. There was a situation at the northern border that required immediate attention. Handled? Handled, Cassian gestured to an empty chair. Sit. Eat. You've earned it. Valor settled into the chair across from them, his movements precise and controlled. His gaze shifted to Seraphina, and she felt the weight of his assessment like a physical thing. My lady, he said smoothly, welcome to the family. I hope you'll find the Iron Dominion to your liking. Seraphina met his eyes without flinching. I'm sure it will be unforgettable. Something flickered across Valor's face. Amusement, maybe. Or recognition. I'm sure it will, he agreed. The rest of the night dragged on until Seraphina thought she might scream, just to break the monotony of false pleasantries and political maneuvering. By the time Cassian finally stood and announced the feast was ending, she felt like she had aged a decade. The crowd applauded as they left the hall together, Cassian's hand firm on the small of her back, guiding her through corridors lined with armed guards who watched them pass with expressions that gave away nothing. They reached the royal chambers in silence. The doors closed behind them with a heavy thud that echoed like a prison cell locking. Cassian moved immediately to the windows, checking the latches, scanning the courtyard below. Then he crossed to the bed and lifted the mattress slightly, revealing 3 daggers hidden beneath. Satisfied, he turned to face her. Now, he said, tell me what you saw. All of it. Seraphina's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. I saw your mother, your father, your brothers. I know what you saw. Cassian's voice was sharp enough to cut. What I need to know is what you are. She went still. Because that was the real question, wasn't it? Not what she saw. What she was. Seraphina had spent her entire life hiding the truth. Her mother died protecting it. Her father sold her to the crown to bury it forever. And now she stood in front of the most dangerous man in the 7 territories with that secret burning in her chest like a wildfire. Tell him, and he might kill her. Lie, and he would know. She took a breath. I'm a hidden truth queen. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Cassian didn't move, didn't blink. For a moment, Seraphina thought maybe he hadn't heard her. Then he laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laughter that came from men who had just realized the universe had played a joke on them too cruel to be anything but tragic. Of course you are, he said, dragging a hand through his hair. Of course the council married me to the one bloodline capable of tearing my mind apart from the inside out. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I. Cassian crossed to the table and poured himself a drink, downing it in one swallow. But here we are. Seraphina's voice came out harder than she intended. Are you going to kill me? He looked at her like she had just asked if the sky was blue. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it through the ceremony. Then what do you want? He refilled the glass but didn't drink it, just stared at the amber liquid like it might hold answers. I want, he said slowly, to know if what you saw changes anything. Changes what? Whether you think I'm a monster. The question landed between them with the weight of an anvil. Seraphina studied him. The exhaustion etched into every line of his face, the way his shoulders carried tension like armor, the careful distance he kept from everything and everyone, as if closeness itself was a weapon that could be used against him. She thought about the boy kneeling beside his mother's corpse, the man being beaten bloody while noblemen watched, the killer standing over his brothers' bodies, shaking so hard he could barely stand. I think, she said carefully, that you're a man who learned cruelty from people who should have taught you love. And I think you've spent every day since trying not to become what they made you. Cassian's hands tightened around the glass hard enough that she heard it crack. That doesn't make me good. No, but it makes you human. The silence that followed was different, heavier. Finally, Cassian set the glass down and turned to face her fully. You need to understand something, he said. This empire runs on fear. The moment I show weakness, every house in the 7 territories will move against me. That collar around your neck? It's not just tradition, it's a message. You belong to me now. And if anyone wants to hurt me, they'll come for you first. Seraphina's hand moved instinctively to the metal band around her throat. So what do I do? Survive. Cassian's eyes were hard as stone. Learn who wants you dead. Learn who wants to use you. Learn the difference between allies and enemies pretending to be allies. And never, ever let them see you weak. And you? What about me? Do I survive you? The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment the mask slipped, and she saw the same fear she had witnessed during the ceremony. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never had something I was afraid to lose before." The first week of marriage was a masterclass in survival. Seraphina learned quickly that the palace was not a home. It was a hunting ground. Every corridor concealed spies. Every meal required a food taster. Every conversation was recorded by servants loyal to someone else. She met the royal council on the third day. They gathered in a chamber carved from black marble, 7 men in expensive robes who looked at her like she was an insect they were deciding whether to crush or ignore. Lord Chancellor Morganth, an ancient vulture of a man with eyes like chips of ice. Duke Harrow, young and ambitious, his smile too perfect to be trustworthy. Admiral Kess, scarred and silent, watching everything. "Welcome, Lady Seraphina," Morganth said, his voice dripping false warmth. "We trust you are adjusting well to your new role." "I'm learning." "Good. There's much to learn. The Iron Dominion is a complex empire. Many moving pieces, many delicate balances." She heard the threat beneath the pleasantry. "I'm sure the king appreciates your guidance." Morganth's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We serve the throne, my lady, as we have for generations, long before King Cassian, long before his father. We are the foundation upon which empires are built." Translation: "We're more permanent than you." Seraphina kept her face neutral. "Then I'm grateful to learn from such experienced men." The meeting continued for another hour, each councilman taking turns measuring her, testing her, trying to find weaknesses they could exploit later. By the time she left, her jaw ached from clenching it so hard. She found Cassian in the training yard, sparring with Vaelor. The 2 men moved like violence given form, blades clashing in patterns too fast for most people to follow. Soldiers lined the edges of the yard, watching their king fight with the kind of reverence usually reserved for gods. Cassian fought differently than Vaelor. Vaelor was precise, controlled, every strike calculated. Cassian was chaos barely leashed. Every movement carried too much force, like he was always 1 second away from losing control completely. The sparring match ended with Cassian's blade at Vaelor's throat. "Yield," Cassian said. Vaelor smiled. "Never." They broke apart, both breathing hard. Cassian noticed Seraphina watching and crossed to where she stood, grabbing a towel from a waiting servant. "Survived the council?" "Barely." "Good. That means they're taking you seriously." He wiped sweat from his face. "What did Morganth say?" "That they serve the throne. Not you." "The throne." Cassian's expression darkened. "They've been saying that for 20 years. Doesn't make it less true." "What do you mean?" He glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. "My father appointed them. Every single one. They advised him through wars, rebellions, purges. And when I took the throne, they stayed, offering guidance, offering support. You think they're loyal to him, not you. I think they're loyal to power. And right now, I'm the one holding it. But the moment that changes..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That night, Seraphina woke to find Cassian's side of the bed empty. She found him standing by the window, staring out at the city below. He hadn't bothered putting on a shirt. In the moonlight, she could see scars crossing his back like a roadmap of violence. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He didn't turn around. "I don't sleep much." "Nightmares?" "Memories." He was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I can't tell the difference." Seraphina moved to stand beside him. The city sprawled beneath them, lights flickering like stars trapped on Earth. "Tell me about her," she said softly. "Your mother." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because I saw how much you loved her, and I think maybe that's the part of you that survived everything else." He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he spoke. "She was kind," he said. "In a court that rewarded cruelty, she was kind. My father hated it, said it made her weak. But she never stopped. She'd sneak food to servants who made mistakes. She'd argue for prisoners to receive fair trials. She protected me from the worst of his rages when I was young." "What happened?" "My father found out she was planning to leave. Take me with her. Escape to the southern territories where his influence couldn't reach. He slit her throat in front of the entire court to make a point about loyalty. Cassian's hands gripped the windowsill hard enough to crack the stone. I was 12. Seraphina felt something break inside her chest. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me everything I needed to know about power. Love makes you vulnerable. Vulnerability gets you killed. Is that what you believe? It's what I know. She thought about the vision she had seen during the ceremony. The boy kneeling beside his mother's body. The terror in his eyes that never quite went away. You're wrong, she said quietly. Cassian turned to look at her, surprise flickering across his face. Love doesn't make you vulnerable, Seraphina continued. Fear does. And you've been so afraid of becoming your father that you've built your entire life around proving you're nothing like him. But all that does is give him power over you even now. His expression went cold. You don't know what you're talking about. I saw him beat you. I saw what he did. And I saw you standing over your brother's bodies afterward, terrified that killing them made you just like him. But it didn't, because he would have enjoyed it, and you didn't. Cassian's breathing had gone shallow. You want to know what I think? Seraphina stepped closer. I think the fact that you're still afraid of becoming a monster is proof you never will be. Monsters don't worry about what they are. They just are. For a moment she thought he might argue. Instead, he pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair like a drowning man grabbing onto wreckage. They stood like that until dawn started breaking over the city. And for the first time in years, Cassian Drakhar let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry everything alone. The second week brought new dangers. Seraphina started receiving gifts. A box of poisoned chocolates from House Corvain, delivered with a note wishing her good health. A silk scarf from Duke Harrow that had been soaked in a toxin designed to absorb through skin. A bouquet of flowers from Admiral Kess that would have released deadly spores if she had smelled them. Every gift was intercepted by the food tasters and guards Cassian had assigned to watch her every move. They're testing you, he explained one evening over dinner, seeing if you're stupid enough to accept presents without checking them first. What happens if I fail the test? You die. And they move on to the next target. Seraphina pushed food around her plate. This is exhausting. Welcome to the Iron Dominion. But the gifts were just the beginning. Rumors started spreading through the court. The new queen was barren. The new queen was a spy for the Southern Rebellion. The new queen had bewitched the king with dark magic. Seraphina heard them all, whispered in corridors when people thought she wasn't listening, discussed openly at feasts where noblewomen smiled to her face and tore her apart the moment she turned away. She learned to ignore most of it, but one rumor made her blood run cold. The new queen was not human. It started small. A comment here. A suspicious glance there, but it spread like wildfire through the palace until even the servants were crossing themselves when she walked past. Someone knew. Someone had figured out what she was. She told Cassian that night. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, crossed to the door, and called for Valor. The commander arrived within minutes, still wearing his military dress from the evening council session. We have a leak, Cassian said without preamble. Someone's spreading rumors about the queen's bloodline. Valor's gaze shifted to Seraphina, then back to Cassian. What kind of rumors? The kind that get people executed for witchcraft. Valor went still. You think someone on the council knows? I think someone suspects, and I need to know who before they turn suspicion into proof. I'll start investigations immediately. Quietly, Cassian warned. If word gets out that I'm investigating the council, they'll move against me before I can move against them. Valor nodded and left. Seraphina waited until the door closed before speaking. You trust him? Cassian poured himself a drink. I trust that his loyalty to the Empire outweighs his personal ambition. For now. And when that changes, then I'll kill him. He said it so casually that it took her a moment to process. You'd kill your oldest ally? If he betrayed me? Yes. Cassian met her eyes. That's the rule here. Loyalty lasts exactly as long as it's convenient. The moment it becomes a liability, it ends, violently. Seraphina felt something twist in her stomach. How do you live like this? By never forgetting that everyone is capable of betrayal given the right circumstances. Even me? Especially you. The words hit like a slap. But Cassian's expression softened slightly. Which is why I haven't killed you yet. Because if you were going to betray me, you would have done it already. You've had dozens of opportunities: poison, assassination, selling information to rival houses. But you haven't. Maybe I'm waiting for the right moment. Maybe. Or maybe you're the first person in this palace who actually gives a damn whether I live or die. The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. I do, she admitted. Give a damn. I know. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile under different circumstances. That's what makes you dangerous. Three days later, Vialor returned with news. He found Cassian and Seraphina in the strategy room, reviewing reports from the border territories. We have a problem, Valor said. Cassian looked up. Define problem. Lord Chancellor Morganthie has been meeting with Duke Harrow in secret 3 times in the past week, always after midnight, always in Harrow's private chambers. What are they discussing? Unknown. But Harrow's been sending coded messages to House Corvain and Admiral Kess. Whatever they're planning, it involves at least half the council. Cassian's expression went deadly calm. That's not a conspiracy. That's a coup. The room went silent. Seraphina's heart hammered against her ribs. What do we do? We move first, Cassian said. But carefully. If we strike too early, we don't have evidence. Too late, and we're dead. I can have men watching them around the clock, Valor offered. Do it. But keep it quiet. I want to know every meeting, every message, every person they contact. And if any of them makes a move against the Queen... He didn't finish. Valor nodded and left. Seraphina waited until they were alone. They're coming for me, aren't they? Cassian stood, crossing to where she sat. They're coming for both of us. You're just the easier target, because I'm weak, because you're new. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. And because they think killing you will break me. Will it? The question hung between them like a blade. Cassian's eyes were storm dark. I don't know. But I'm not interested in finding out. But the attack came during the Moonfall Festival. The palace had been decorated for weeks. Silver banners hung from every balcony. Lanterns floated through the courtyards like captured stars. Musicians played beside fountains that had been dyed crimson for the occasion. Nobles danced beneath chandeliers while servants circulated with wine and delicacies imported from across the empire. Seraphina stood beside Cassian on the balcony overlooking the ballroom, watching the celebration unfold below. It's beautiful, she said. It's a distraction. Cassian's eyes never stopped scanning the crowd. Keep people drunk and entertained, and they forget they're living in a prison. You really don't trust anyone, do you? I trust you. The admission caught her off guard. Before she could respond, the music stopped. The ballroom went silent. Then the doors exploded inward. Men in black armor poured through the entrance, swords drawn, faces covered. They moved with military precision, cutting down guards before most people even realized what was happening. Screams erupted. Nobles scattered like insects, trampling each other in their desperation to escape. Blood sprayed across polished marble floors as soldiers fell beneath coordinated strikes. Cassian moved instantly, shifting partially into his alpha form. His eyes went gold. Claws extended from his fingertips. When he roared, the sound shook the walls. The attackers hesitated. Just for a second. That was all Cassian needed. He tore through them like a hurricane, moving too fast for human eyes to track. Men died screaming. Armor crumpled like paper. Blood painted the walls in arterial sprays. Seraphina stood frozen, unable to process the violence unfolding in front of her. Then someone grabbed her from behind. A blade pressed against her throat. Don't move, a voice hissed in her ear. She recognized it immediately. Duke Harrow. Cassian spun, his gaze locking onto them. Blood dripped from his claws. Bodies lay scattered around him like broken dolls. Let her go, he said. His voice was barely human. Harrow pressed the blade harder. Make one move, and I open her throat. The entire ballroom had gone silent, except for the sounds of the dying. Cassian's eyes blazed gold. You know I'll kill you for this. Maybe. Harrow's voice was steady despite the carnage. But you'll watch her die first. Seraphina felt the blade bite into her skin. Warm blood trickled down her neck. Then footsteps echoed from the entrance. Lord Valor walked through the destroyed doors, surrounded by more soldiers in black armor. His face was calm, almost bored. "Your Majesty," he said, "I think it's time we had a conversation about the future of the Iron Dominion." Cassian went absolutely still. "Valor." His voice was hollow. The commander smiled. "Did you really think I'd serve a king who let weakness corrupt him? You used to be strong, Cassian, feared, ruthless." Then she arrived. Valor gestured at Seraphina. "And suddenly you're negotiating instead of conquering, showing mercy instead of strength. Mercy isn't weakness. In this empire it is." Valor drew his sword, "and weak kings don't survive." The betrayal hit Cassian like a physical blow. Seraphina saw it break something inside him. Not rage, grief, because this wasn't just an enemy. This was the man he had trusted most in the world. Valor's expression remained neutral. "I'll make this simple. Renounce your throne, exile yourself, and I'll let the queen live. Refuse, and Harrow opens her throat while you watch." Cassian's claws dug into his palms hard enough to draw blood. For a moment, Seraphina thought he might actually surrender. Then his eyes met hers, and she saw the boy kneeling beside his mother's corpse, the man beaten bloody while noblemen watched, the killer who never wanted to become a monster. "No," Cassian said quietly. Valor's smile faded. "No?" Cassian's voice grew stronger. "You think killing her breaks me? You think it makes me weak?" He shifted fully into his alpha form, growing larger, more monstrous, until he towered over everyone in the room. "It makes me what you always wanted, a king without mercy. What are you—" Cassian moved, faster than anything human should move. He covered the distance between them in a heartbeat, slamming into Valor with enough force to shatter bone. They crashed through the balcony railing and fell 3 stories to the courtyard below. Harrow's grip on Seraphina loosened for just a second. It was enough. She drove her elbow back into his ribs, spun, and brought her knee up into his groin. He collapsed with a strangled cry. Seraphina ran. Behind her, the ballroom erupted into chaos as loyalist guards finally regrouped and clashed with Valor's soldiers. Steel rang against steel. Men screamed. Fire spread through the silk decorations, turning the celebration into an inferno. She had to find Cassian. She had to— Something grabbed her ankle. She fell hard, chin cracking against marble. Harrow hauled himself on top of her, blade raised. His face was twisted with rage and pain. "You stupid bitch. You think you matter? You're nothing. Just another whore warming the king's bed until—" His head jerked back violently. Blood sprayed across Seraphina's face. Harrow collapsed sideways, dead before he hit the ground. Seraphina looked up. An old woman stood above her, holding a bloody knife. Her face was familiar. One of the servants. The one who had wrapped the collar around her throat on the wedding night. "Come, girl," the woman said, extending a hand. "There's something you need to see." "What?" "The truth." The woman led her down through the palace, past corridors filled with fighting, through hidden passages that smelled of rot and old stone. They descended deeper than Seraphina knew the palace went. Finally, they reached a door carved with symbols that made her eyes hurt to look at. The woman pushed it open. Inside was a chamber lit by torches that burned with sickly green flame. And chained to the far wall, surrounded by guards and ancient armor, was a man, or what was left of one. He was old, skeletal. His skin hung loose over bones like fabric draped over a frame, but his eyes burned with intelligence and malice that made Seraphina's blood run cold. The woman bowed. "Former King Malrek Drakhar, still alive." Seraphina's world tilted. "That's impossible." Cassian said his father was dead. The woman's expression was grim. "The council has kept him alive for years. Hidden, controlled. They feed him just enough to survive. And in return, he tells them how to manipulate his son. Why? Because a king raised in violence is easier to control. They wanted Cassian brutal, feared, isolated. A divided kingdom profits corrupt men." Malrek laughed. It was a sound like bones grinding together. "My son," he rasped, still trying so hard not to be me. His gaze found Seraphina. "And you must be the little queen everyone's so worried about." Seraphina's hands trembled. "What are you?" His smile revealed teeth filed to points.
I'm the truth he's been running from his entire life. I'm the monster under the bed, the nightmare that never ends. He leaned forward as far as his chains allowed.
Touch me, little queen. Use that forbidden sight of yours. See what I made, what I created, what I forged from that screaming child into the king who rules an empire. Seraphina wanted to run, but she had to know. She stepped forward and placed her hand on his face. The vision that hit her was worse than anything she had ever experienced. She saw Malrek planning everything, the abuse, the murders, the wars, all of it deliberate. He hadn't been a madman. He had been an architect. Every beating designed to build resilience. Every betrayal designed to teach distrust. Every loss designed to harden Cassian into the perfect weapon. Malrek believed suffering created stronger rulers. He had tortured his own son intentionally to forge the perfect king, and the council had helped him do it. Seraphina pulled back, gasping. Malrek smiled. Now you understand. Everything my son is, everything he's accomplished, I made him. His strength, his power, his ability to survive. You made him broken. Broken things cut deeper. Above them, the sounds of battle grew louder. The woman grabbed Seraphina's arm. We need to go. If Violor finds out you know about this, it's too late for that. They turned. Lord Valor stood in the doorway, sword drawn, surrounded by soldiers. His expression was almost sad. I really hoped you wouldn't find this, he said to Seraphina. It makes everything so much more complicated. You're working for him, Seraphina realized. For Malrek. Not for him. For the idea of him. Valor stepped into the chamber. Cassian's been getting soft, weak. We needed leverage to remind him what he really is. What he was always meant to be. A monster. A king. Valor's voice hardened. And if that queen of his had to die to push him back where he belongs, so be it. He raised his sword. Then the walls exploded. Cassian crashed through stone and mortar like a living avalanche, his alpha form fully manifested, all claws and fangs and barely controlled rage. He saw Valor. He saw his father. And something inside him finally, completely, irrevocably broke. Not in rage. In grief so profound it seemed to shake the foundations of the palace itself. The most feared king in the 7 territories stood in that chamber and wept like the child he had never been allowed to be. And Malrek, chained to the wall, smiled. Because even now, after everything, he believed pain would make his son stronger. The silence in that underground chamber was worse than any scream. Cassian stood there in his alpha form, towering and monstrous, while tears carved tracks through the blood on his face. His claws dug into the stone floor hard enough to crack it. Every breath came out ragged, like something inside him was tearing apart with each inhale. Seraphina had never seen anything more heartbreaking. Because this wasn't rage. This was grief so old and so deep that it had calcified into the foundation of who he was. Every decision he'd ever made, every wall he'd built, every person he'd pushed away, all of it traced back to the skeletal nightmare chained to that wall, smiling like he'd just won a game only he knew he was playing. Malrek's voice cut through the silence like a rusted blade. There he is, my beautiful broken boy, still crying after all these years. Cassian's head snapped up. The golden eyes that met his father's were feral, inhuman. I should have killed you, he said. His voice barely sounded like it came from a throat anymore. When I took the throne, I should have made sure you were dead. But you didn't. Malrek's chains rattled as he shifted. You know why? Because part of you still wanted my approval, still wanted me to see you and say you'd done well. That's the sickness I planted in you, boy. The need to prove yourself to the man who destroyed you. Valor stepped forward, sword still raised. Your Majesty, this doesn't have to... Cassian moved faster than thought. One moment Valor was standing. The next he was slammed against the wall, hard enough to leave a crater in the stone. Cassian's clawed hand wrapped around his throat, lifting him off the ground. You, Cassian growled. You were my brother in everything but blood. I trusted you with my life. With her life. And you sold us both to the same monster who tortured me as a child. Valor's face was turning purple, but his expression remained defiant. I didn't betray you. I tried to save you. From yourself. From her. From becoming soft. Soft. The word came out like poison. You think mercy is softness? In this empire? Yes, Then you never understood what made me strong. Cassian's claws tightened. It wasn't fear, it wasn't cruelty. It was surviving men like you and my father, and still choosing not to become what you wanted me to be. He threw Valor across the chamber. The commander hit the ground and rolled, coming up with his sword. Blood streamed from his mouth, but he was smiling. "You're wrong," he said. "Everything you are, you owe to violence. Every lesson, every scar, every instinct that keeps you alive. Your father built you into a weapon, and weapons don't get to choose what they cut." Cassian shifted back to human form. The transformation was instant, leaving him standing naked except for the blood and sweat coating his skin. But somehow he looked more dangerous this way. More controlled. "You're right about one thing," he said quietly. "I am a weapon. But weapons have two ends, and you just grabbed the wrong one." He moved. Valor was fast, trained, one of the best swordsmen in the 7 territories. It didn't matter. Cassian fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He caught the blade with his bare hand, blood spraying as it cut deep into his palm, and drove his other fist into Valor's ribs hard enough to crack bone. The commander staggered. Cassian swept his legs, slamming him face first into the stone. Then Cassian ripped the sword from Valor's hand and drove it through his shoulder, pinning him to the ground. Valor screamed. Cassian knelt beside him, his voice cold and empty. "You wanted to see the monster? Here he is." He stood, leaving Valor pinned and bleeding, and turned to face his father. Malrek looked almost pleased. "Now that's my boy. That's the king I made." "You made nothing," Cassian's voice shook. "You broke a child and convinced yourself you were building something. But all you created was pain, and I'm done letting you own that." He crossed to where Malrek sat chained. The old king's smile never wavered. "You going to kill me now? Finally finish what you should have done years ago?" "No." Cassian's expression was hollow. "I'm going to leave you here, alive, watching as I dismantle everything you built, every system, every corrupt alliance, every piece of this empire you poisoned, and you get to rot in this cell knowing that the son you tortured became a better man than you ever were." Malrek's smile finally cracked. "You think you're better than me?" "I know I am, because I didn't need to destroy my child to prove it." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Then Seraphina's voice cut through the tension. "Cassian." He turned. She stood there, pale and shaking, one hand pressed to her stomach. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped. Cassian's expression went through a dozen emotions in the space of a heartbeat. Shock, fear, wonder, terror. They flickered across his face too fast to name before settling into something that looked like devastation. "How long have you known?" His voice was barely a whisper. 3 days. The silence stretched. Malrek started laughing. It was a wet, rattling sound that echoed off the stone walls like bones breaking. "Oh, this is perfect," he wheezed. "You're bringing another Drakhar into this world? Another child to ruin? Tell me, boy, are you going to be a better father than I was, or are you going to watch yourself become me?" Cassian's hands were shaking. "Shut up. Are you going to teach them strength through suffering?" Malrek continued, his voice gaining energy. "Are you going to beat the weakness out of them like I did to you, or are you going to try to be soft and watch them get destroyed by men harder than you?" I said, "Shut up," because that's the curse, boy. The real inheritance. You can try to be different all you want, but when that child cries in the night and won't stop, when they disappoint you, when they show weakness, you're going to feel my hands on your shoulders teaching you exactly how to. Cassian roared and shifted back into his alpha form in a heartbeat. He grabbed Malrek's chains and tore them from the wall with enough force to bring down chunks of stone. The old king fell forward, and Cassian caught him by the throat. For one stretched moment, Seraphina thought he was going to do it, going to kill the man who had destroyed him. Then Cassian dropped him. Malrek hit the ground, gasping. Cassian shifted back to human form, his voice dead. "You're not worth it. You're not worth becoming what you want me to be." He turned away from his father for the last time and crossed to where Seraphina stood. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite the blood coating his fingers. "Are you okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "The baby?" "As far as I know." Cassian's eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were wet. "I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. What if I— You won't, Seraphina interrupted. You won't because you're afraid of it, and that fear is what makes you different. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. Above them, the sounds of battle had started to fade. Either the Loyalists had won, or Valor's coup had succeeded, and they'd be dead within the hour. We need to get out of here, Seraphina said. Cassian nodded. He grabbed a cloak from one of the dead guards and wrapped it around himself. Then he hauled Valor up by the sword still pinned through his shoulder. The commander screamed. You're coming with us, Cassian said. We're going to end this tonight. All of it. Oti. They climbed through passages slick with blood and smoke. Bodies littered the stairs. Some wore the black armor of Valor's rebels. Others wore the crimson of the royal guard. It was impossible to tell who was winning until they finally emerged into the main palace. What they found was carnage. The throne room had been transformed into a battlefield. Fires burned in the corners, fed by tapestries and broken furniture. Blood pooled across the marble floors in patterns that looked almost artistic. Men fought in tight clusters, steel ringing against steel, while others lay dying between overturned tables. But the tide had clearly turned. The rebels were being pushed back, surrounded, cut down by soldiers who fought with the kind of desperate loyalty that came from knowing their king was still alive. When Cassian walked through the doors, dragging Valor behind him, the entire room went silent. Weapons lowered. Men who had been trying to kill each other moments before turned to stare. Cassian's voice carried across the hall like thunder. It's over. He threw Valor forward. The commander collapsed, blood streaming from his shoulder, gasping for breath. Lord Valor Thane attempted a coup tonight, Cassian announced. He conspired with members of the royal council to overthrow the throne and murder your queen. He failed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Any man who joined his rebellion has a choice, Cassian continued. Drop your weapons now and swear renewed loyalty to the Iron Throne, or die where you stand. You have 10 seconds to decide. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, one by one, swords clattered to the floor. Men knelt. Within moments, the entire rebel force had surrendered. Cassian gestured to his captain of the guard. Arrest them all. Separate cells. No contact. We'll sort the coerced from the conspirators later. Guards moved immediately, hauling men away in chains. Cassian turned his attention to the nobles cowering along the walls. And the council? Where are they? A voice came from the shadows. Right here, Your Majesty. Lord Chancellor Morganth stepped forward, flanked by Duke Harrow's younger brother and 3 other councilmen. Their robes were stained with ash and blood, but they held themselves with the kind of arrogance that came from decades of unchallenged power. We had no knowledge of Lord Valor's plans, Morganth said smoothly. We are as shocked as you are by this betrayal. Seraphina watched Cassian's expression carefully. She saw the calculation happening behind his eyes, the weighing of options, the political mathematics of who to destroy and who to control. You're lying, Cassian said flatly. Morganth's composure cracked slightly. Your Majesty, I assure you, I found my father tonight. Cassian's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Alive, chained beneath the palace in a chamber only the council knew existed. Would you like to explain how that happened without your knowledge? The color drained from Morganth's face. How long? Cassian stepped closer. How many years did you keep him alive down there while pretending he was dead? How many times did you visit him for advice on how to manipulate me? Morganth's mouth opened and closed uselessly. 20 years, Cassian said quietly. Since I was a child. You've been playing me like a puppet, using my father's brutality as a roadmap for how to keep me isolated and afraid. You wanted a strong king? You got one, but now he's strong enough to break free. He gestured to the guards. Arrest them. All of them. Treason, conspiracy, manipulating the crown. The charges will be made official after a full investigation. Your Majesty, please, Morganth began. The only reason you're not dead already is because I want everyone who helped you to be exposed first. Cassian's eyes were ice. Now get them out of my sight before I change my mind. The councilmen were dragged away screaming protests that nobody listened to. When the throne room finally cleared of everyone except his most trusted guards, Cassian sagged against a pillar. The adrenaline that had been holding him upright drained away,
leaving him looking older than Seraphina had ever seen him.
She crossed to his side. You did it. Did I? His voice was hollow. I tore apart my own government, arrested half the military leadership, exposed secrets that will make every noble house question my legitimacy. This isn't victory. This is barely controlled chaos. But you're alive. I'm alive. Our child is alive. The word child made him flinch. He looked at her stomach like it was a bomb about to detonate.
I can't do this, he said. I can't be a father. I don't know how. Everything I learned about parenting, I learned from a monster who tortured me for 18 years. What if I... Then we learn together, Seraphina interrupted. We figure it out. We make mistakes and fix them and try not to repeat them. That's what people do. People, maybe. But I'm not... You're human, she said firmly. You're flawed and scared and broken in places that might never fully heal. But you're human. And humans get to choose who they become. His hand found hers, gripping it tight enough to hurt. What if I choose wrong? Then I'll be there to tell you. For the first time that night, something that might have been hope flickered across his face. Then the doors burst open again. A guard stumbled through, gasping for breath. Your Majesty, the city. There's been an incident. Cassian straightened immediately. What kind of incident? Fire. The eastern districts. Spreading fast. People are saying it's the rebels. That they planned it as a distraction. How many dead? The guard's face went pale. Hundreds. Maybe more. The fires jumped 3 blocks before anyone could respond. Cassian closed his eyes. Of course they did. He turned to Seraphina. I have to go. The people need to see their king fighting alongside them, or they'll think I've abandoned them. I'm coming with you. No, you're pregnant. I'm not risking... I'm not helpless, she cut him off. And if you leave me here alone after what just happened, I'll be a target for every opportunist in the palace who thinks killing the queen will destabilize you. He wanted to argue. She could see it in his face. But she was right, and they both knew it. Fine, he said, but you stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. And if things get too dangerous, you run. Promise me. I promise. The lie came easier than she expected. Shashin, the eastern districts burned like the end of the world. Flames climbed buildings and jumped streets, fed by the wind and the wooden construction that defined the poorer quarters. People ran screaming through smoke-choked alleys, while others tried desperately to save what little they owned. Cassian arrived at the head of a column of soldiers and immediately started issuing orders. Bucket lines to the wells. Get the women and children to the northern square. Anyone strong enough to carry water, get moving. If a building can't be saved, tear it down before the fire spreads. Men scrambled to obey. Cassian himself grabbed a bucket and joined the line, working alongside common laborers like he was one of them. Seraphina watched nobles who had come to help hesitate, uncertain whether to demean themselves by doing manual labor. Then she grabbed a bucket too. If the queen was willing to get her hands dirty, they could hardly refuse. For hours they fought the fire. Seraphina's arms burned. Her throat was raw from smoke. Ash covered every inch of exposed skin, but slowly, agonizingly, they started to gain ground. The fire began to die. By dawn, the eastern districts were still standing, damaged, burned in places, but not destroyed. Cassian stood among the ruins, covered in soot and sweat, and addressed the crowd that had gathered. I know you're scared, he said. His voice carried despite the exhaustion weighing it down. I know you've heard rumors about a coup, about arrests, about the council being corrupt, and I know you're wondering if your king is strong enough to protect you. He gestured at the burned buildings around them. This was meant to distract us, to divide us, to make you think I was too busy fighting enemies in the palace to care about enemies burning your homes. The crowd was silent, listening. But here's what actually happened tonight, Cassian continued. The moment I heard about the fire, I came. Not to give orders from a safe distance, but to fight alongside you, because that's what kings are supposed to do. Not rule from thrones, protect from the front lines. A woman in the crowd called out, What about the council? Are they really traitors? Yes. Cassian didn't hesitate. They've been manipulating the throne for decades, using fear and violence to keep themselves in power. But that ends today. From now on, the council will be chosen by merit, not birthright.
There will be representatives from every territory, every district, even here. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A man stepped forward. Why should we believe you? Kings make promises all the time. Then they forget them the moment it's convenient. Cassian met his eyes. You shouldn't believe me. You should watch what I do. Hold me accountable. And if I fail, you have the right to demand better. That's not how empires work. Then maybe, Cassian said quietly, it's time to change how empires work. The silence that followed was different, uncertain, but less hostile. Then someone started clapping. It spread slowly. One person, then another, then dozens. Soon the entire crowd was applauding, not with the forced enthusiasm of subjects ordered to show loyalty, but with the genuine appreciation of people who had just watched their king fight for them when he didn't have to. Cassian turned away before they could see how much it affected him. Seraphina found him later, sitting on the remains of a burned wall, staring at nothing. She sat beside him. That was good. What you said, it was necessary. It was more than that. You gave them hope. Hope doesn't rebuild homes. No. But it gives people a reason to rebuild them. He looked at her, really looked, taking in the ash coating her face and the exhaustion in her eyes. You should hate me for bringing you into this, for putting you in danger, for saving my life, for trusting me, for letting me see who you really are. She shook her head. I chose this, knowing what it meant, knowing what it would cost. You didn't know about the baby. No, but I know now, and I'm not running. He pulled her against him, and they sat there among the ruins while the sun rose over a city that had almost burned. You're going to be a good father, she said quietly. How do you know? Because you're terrified of being a bad one. That fear will keep you trying, keep you questioning yourself, keep you from becoming certain that your way is the only way. His laugh was bitter. So I get to spend the rest of my life afraid I'm going to damage my own child? Better than spending it certain you're doing the right thing while you destroy them. She felt his chest shake with something between a laugh and a sob. You're too wise for someone so young, he said, and you're too broken for someone so strong. I guess we balance each other out. They stayed like that until duty dragged them back to the palace. The trials began 3 days later. Cassian ordered them public, held in the central square where anyone could attend, where every accusation and every piece of evidence would be laid bare for the entire empire to witness. Lord Chancellor Morganthi was first. He stood in chains before a tribunal of judges Cassian had personally selected, his expensive robes replaced with prison gray. The arrogance that had defined him for decades had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow old man who looked like he'd already accepted his death. The charges were read aloud. Treason, conspiracy against the crown, manipulation of royal authority, concealment of the former king's survival. The evidence was damning. Letters between Morganthi and Malrek, records of secret meetings, testimony from servants who had seen the council visiting the underground chamber, financial documents showing bribes paid to keep guards silent. By the time the prosecution finished, there was no question of guilt. The judge looked to Cassian. Your Majesty, do you have anything to add before we deliver a verdict? Cassian stood. He had insisted on attending every trial personally, despite the advisors who told him it was beneath his station. Lord Morganthi, he said, you served my father for 30 years. You advised him through wars and rebellions. You helped him build an empire. And when he became too dangerous to control, you locked him in a cell and pretended he was dead. Then you spent 20 years manipulating me the same way you manipulated him, using fear and violence to keep the throne weak enough to manage. Morganthi said nothing. I could kill you for that, Cassian continued. Publicly. As a warning to anyone else who might think they can control kings. But that's exactly what my father would have done. So instead, I'm going to let the law decide. A real trial, real evidence, real justice, because that's what I'm trying to build. He sat back down. The verdict came within minutes. Guilty on all charges. The sentence, execution by beheading, to be carried out at dawn. Morganthi accepted it with more dignity than Seraphina expected. He bowed to the judges and was led away without protest. The trials continued for days. Some councilmen were executed. Others were sentenced to life in prison. A few were exiled, stripped of titles and lands, sent away with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Valor's trial was last. He stood before the tribunal with his arm in a sling, the sword wound in his shoulder still healing. Unlike Morganthie, he showed no remorse, no fear, just cold calculation. The charges were read: treason, conspiracy to murder the queen, leading a military coup. The evidence was presented: testimony from soldiers he had recruited, letters outlining the plan, weapons caches he had hidden throughout the palace. But when the judge asked if he had anything to say in his defense, Valor smiled. "I regret nothing," he said. "Everything I did was to save this empire from weakness." King Cassian was becoming soft, prioritizing mercy over strength, negotiating with enemies instead of crushing them. That would have destroyed us eventually. I moved to prevent it. "So you admit to treason?" the judge asked. "I admit to loyalty. Loyalty to what the Iron Dominion is supposed to be. A place strong enough to survive in a world that devours the weak." The judge looked to Cassian. "Your Majesty?" Cassian stood slowly. His face was unreadable. "You're right about one thing," he said to Valor. "The world does devour the weak. But strength isn't just military power. It's not just the ability to kill anyone who threatens you. Real strength is building something that lasts, something people believe in, something worth protecting." Valor scoffed. "Pretty words. Let's see how long they last when the next warlord comes for your borders." Cassian's expression hardened. "You think I've gone soft? You think mercy has made me weak? I executed my own brothers. I burned rebel strongholds. I've killed more men than I can count. But I did it to protect this empire, not to feed my ego. You attacked my wife, my unborn child, and you call that loyalty? It was necessary." "No." Cassian's voice went cold. "It was cowardice. You couldn't beat me in combat, so you went after someone weaker. That's not strength. That's pathetic." The words hit Valor like a physical blow. The verdict came swift, guilty, death by combat, against the king himself. Valor's smile finally cracked. "You'd fight me yourself? You wanted the old me back?" Cassian's eyes blazed. "The monster who solves problems with violence? Fine. You get your wish. Tomorrow at dawn, just you and me. No armor, no rules. We end this the way you wanted." The arena was packed before sunrise. It seemed like half of the capital had come to watch. Nobles in expensive seats, common folk crowding the upper levels, merchants, soldiers, even children perched on their parents' shoulders to get a better view. Seraphina sat in the royal box, her hands gripped so tight around the railing her knuckles were white. Cassian stood in the center of the arena wearing nothing but loose pants and boots. No armor, no weapons, just skin and muscle and scars that told a story of violence survived. Valor entered from the opposite gate, similarly dressed. His shoulder was still bandaged, but he moved without hesitation, without fear. The rules were simple. Fight until one of them couldn't continue. No surrender. No mercy. An official raised his hand, then dropped it. They moved. Valor struck first, fast and precise, aiming for Cassian's throat. But Cassian was faster. He deflected the blow and countered with a strike to Valor's wounded shoulder. Valor grunted, but didn't slow. They fought like men who had trained together for years. Each one anticipated the other's moves, blocked, countered, adapted. But Cassian fought with something Valor didn't have: purpose. He wasn't fighting for glory or power or to prove a point. He was fighting for the woman watching from the stands, for the child she carried, for the empire he was trying to build. And that made all the difference. Cassian started landing more hits, harder hits, each one calculated to damage without killing, to hurt without ending it too quickly. Valor began to slow. His breathing grew ragged. Blood streamed from a cut above his eye, making it hard to see. But he kept fighting, because that's what warriors did. They fought until they couldn't anymore. The end came suddenly. Cassian feinted left. Valor committed to the block, and Cassian's right fist caught him square in the jaw with enough force to snap his head back. Valor's legs buckled. He hit the ground hard. Cassian stood over him, chest heaving, waiting. Valor tried to rise, made it to his knees before collapsing again. The crowd went silent. Cassian could have finished it. One strike, quick, clean.
Instead, he knelt beside Valor. You were right about one thing, he said quietly. The world is cruel. It does devour the weak. But you were wrong about what makes people strong. It's not fear. It's not violence. It's having something worth protecting, something more important than survival. Valor coughed blood. Then you've already lost. Because the moment you care about something, it becomes a weapon someone can use against you. Maybe. Cassian stood. But I'd rather live with that risk than die alone like you're about to. He turned to the crowd. Lord Valor Thane is guilty of treason. The sentence is death. Does anyone dispute this? Silence. Cassian looked back at Valor. Any last words? Valor smiled through bloody teeth. You'll regret this. The mercy, the compassion, all of it. And when you do, you'll wish you'd listened. Cassian's expression didn't change. Maybe. But I'll never wish I'd become you. He shifted into his alpha form in a heartbeat and ended it with one strike. Quick. Clean. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the arena walls. But Cassian didn't hear them. He shifted back to human form, standing over Valor's body, and felt nothing but emptiness. Seraphina found him afterward in the private chambers, washing blood from his hands. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around him from behind and held on. I killed my best friend today, he said quietly. I know. He was wrong about everything, but part of me understands why he did it. I know that too. His hands were shaking. What if he was right? What if caring about you makes me weak? Seraphina turned him to face her. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you vulnerable. There's a difference. Is there? Weak means you can't protect what matters. Vulnerable means you have something that matters enough to protect. You're the most dangerous man in this empire specifically because you have something to lose now. His hand moved to her stomach. Still flat. Still unchanged. But carrying a future neither of them knew how to navigate. I'm terrified, he admitted. Good. That means you'll try. They stood like that until duty called them away again, because empires didn't stop needing kings just because kings needed rest. The reforms began immediately. Cassian dissolved the old council and announced open positions. Anyone from any territory could apply. Qualifications would be based on competence, not bloodline. The nobles hated it, but the common people loved it enough that the nobles couldn't risk opposing it publicly. Border negotiations replaced border wars. Trade agreements were signed with territories that had been enemies for generations. Military budgets were redirected toward infrastructure, roads, schools, hospitals. It wasn't perfect. Nothing that big ever was. But it was different. And different was enough to give people hope. 3 months after the coup, Seraphina woke in the middle of the night to find Cassian missing again. She found him in the nursery they had started preparing. He stood beside the empty cradle, staring at it like it might bite him. Can't sleep? She asked. He didn't look up. What if I'm like him? You won't be. You don't know that. I do. She crossed to stand beside him. Because Malric never questioned himself, never worried he was doing damage. He was certain he was right. You question everything. That doubt is what protects our child. His hand gripped the edge of the cradle. I've killed so many people. I know. I've done terrible things. I know that too. Then how can I... You raise them honestly, Seraphina interrupted. You tell them the truth. You don't hide who you were or what you did. You teach them that people can change, that mistakes don't define you, that choosing to be better matters more than being perfect. What if they hate me? Then you'll survive it, the same way you survived everything else. He finally looked at her. His eyes were wet. I don't deserve this. A family, a chance to be happy. Not after everything I've done. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. So the question is what you do with it. The baby kicked for the first time that night. Seraphina gasped and grabbed Cassian's hand, pressing it to her stomach. He froze when he felt it. That tiny flutter of movement, proof of life, proof of something beyond survival. His face crumpled and he dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her stomach. I'll try, he whispered. I don't know if I'll be good at it, but I'll try. That's all anyone can do. Above them, the palace settled into the quiet that came before dawn. The ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of violence and cruelty now held something different. Not perfection, hope. The fragile, terrifying hope that broken people could build something worth protecting. Itigit. The revelation came 6 months into her pregnancy. Seraphina woke to pain so sharp it stole her breath. Not contractions. Something else. Something wrong. Cassian called for the royal physician immediately. The old woman examined her while Cassian paced like a caged animal, his hands clenching and unclenching with each step. Finally, the physician straightened. "Your Majesty." "My lady, I need to be honest with you." Seraphina's heart stopped. "What's wrong?" "The child carries both bloodlines, Drakhar and hidden truth. That combination has never existed before. The power it generates is," she hesitated, choosing words carefully, "unstable. The pregnancy is putting enormous strain on the queen's body. If it continues full term, there's a significant risk she won't survive the birth." The room went silent. Cassian's voice came out hollow. "How significant? 70%, maybe higher." "No!" The word exploded from him. "No! There has to be another way." The physician's face was grim. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I've consulted every text, every healer in the 7 territories. The power inside that child is too great. It's burning through her from the inside out. Unless we terminate the pregnancy, absolutely not." Everyone turned to Seraphina. Her voice was steady despite the pain still radiating through her body. "We're not killing our child because it might kill me." Cassian crossed to her side. "Seraphina, if you die, then I die. But I'm not making that choice. Not for anyone. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly." She met his eyes. "This child is the future. The heir to everything we're trying to build. More than that, it's ours. And I'm not giving up on it just because I'm afraid. I can't lose you." The rawness in his voice nearly broke her. "You might not have a choice," she said gently. "But that's the thing about love. It makes you vulnerable. It gives you something you can lose. And you take that risk anyway because the alternative is living in a cage where nothing matters enough to hurt you." His hands cupped her face. "I just found you. I just started believing I could be more than what my father made me. If you die, then you keep going. For our child. For the Empire. For every person counting on you to be better than the kings who came before. That's not fair. No, but it's real." The physician cleared her throat. "There is one other option. It's dangerous, experimental, but it might give you both a chance." "Tell me," Cassian said immediately. "There are old texts about hidden truth queens, how their power could be channeled, controlled. If we could find someone with enough knowledge of that bloodline, they might be able to stabilize the pregnancy. Where do we find someone like that?" "The South. There are rumors of a woman living in the ruins of the old truth temples. They say she's the last keeper of the ancient knowledge. How long would it take to get there?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. Through hostile territory that hasn't recognized your authority yet." Cassian didn't hesitate. "We leave tomorrow." "Your Majesty, you can't abandon the capital. Not now. The reforms are still fragile. If you leave, the nobles will see it as weakness. Then they'll have to wait." Cassian's voice was steel. "Nothing matters if she dies." "Nothing." Seraphina grabbed his hand. "You can't leave the Empire. Not for me. Watch me." "Cassian, this is not a discussion." He turned to the physician. "Prepare whatever you need. We leave at first light." The physician bowed and hurried out. When they were alone, Seraphina tried again. "You're risking everything. The throne, the stability, all of it. I don't care. You have to care. That's what makes you a good king." "Then I'll be a bad king." His voice cracked. "But I won't be a widower raising a child alone while pretending I did the right thing by choosing duty over the only person who ever made me believe I could be more than a monster." The words hung between them like a confession. Seraphina pulled him close, feeling his heart hammer against her chest. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we go south." They left before dawn with a small guard of 20 men. Cassian wanted to move fast, which meant traveling light. The journey was brutal. They rode through territories that had spent generations under the Iron Dominion's boot, villages that had been burned during the wars,
forests where rebels still hid, mountains where bandits preyed on anyone weak enough to attack. But everywhere they went, word spread ahead of them. The king was traveling with his pregnant queen, riding through dangerous lands, risking everything. It changed something. People who had hated the empire their entire lives came out to watch them pass. Some threw stones, others just stared, but a few offered food, shelter, directions through the mountains that would save them days. One night, they camped in a village that had been destroyed during one of Cassian's early campaigns. The buildings were still ruins, the fields still scorched. An old woman approached their fire. Her face was carved with grief that had calcified into something harder. "You killed my sons," she said to Cassian. "Both of them. Burned them alive when they refused to surrender." Cassian didn't look away. "I remember." "Good." She spat at his feet. "I wanted you to remember their faces when you burn in hell." She turned to leave. "Wait," Cassian said. His voice was quiet. "What were their names?" The woman stopped. "What?" "Their names. I should know them. If I killed them, I should at least know who they were." The woman's face crumpled. "Davith and Kael. They were farmers, good boys. They just wanted to protect their home. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. No, it doesn't. But for what it's worth, I think about them. All of them. Every person I killed. Every village I burned. I can't undo it. But I'm trying to build something different now. Something where people don't have to choose between loyalty and survival." The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she reached into her cloak and pulled out a small bundle of herbs. "For the queen," she said. "It'll help with the pain. My daughter used it when she was carrying. Why would you help us?" "Because," the woman said quietly, "my boys wouldn't want me to become as cruel as the men who killed them. They were better than that. So I have to be too." She walked away before anyone could thank her. Seraphina found Cassian later, sitting alone at the edge of camp, staring at the bundle of herbs. "You okay?" she asked. "I killed her sons, and she gave us medicine. People are complicated." He looked at her. "How do I live with this? Knowing I've destroyed so many lives?" "The same way everyone lives with their mistakes. You acknowledge them, you carry them, and you try to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. What if it's not enough? Then you keep trying anyway." They reached the southern ruins 2 weeks later. The temples were older than the empire itself, massive stone structures reclaimed by jungle, their walls covered in vines and symbols that hurt to look at directly. In the center, beside a pool of black water, sat a woman. She was ancient, her skin like weathered leather, her eyes milky white. But when she spoke, her voice was strong. The hidden truth. Queen finally comes home. Seraphina felt power radiating from the woman like heat from a forge. "Are you the keeper?" "I am the last." The woman gestured for them to approach. "Your child burns inside you. I can feel it from here. Can you help?" "Perhaps." The woman's blind eyes seemed to see right through them. "But first, you must understand what you carry. This child is not just an heir. It's a bridge between two bloodlines that were never meant to combine. The power it holds could reshape the empire. Or destroy it." Cassian stepped forward. "We just want our child to survive. Survival is not guaranteed." The woman reached out, her hand finding Seraphina's stomach with impossible accuracy. "This pregnancy will require sacrifice, pain beyond what you've already endured. And even then, there's no certainty." "What kind of sacrifice?" Seraphina asked. The woman smiled. "Everything important requires sacrifice, child. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price." "Tell us what to do," Cassian demanded. The woman's smile faded. "You misunderstand, King. This is not your choice to make. It's hers. The child lives inside her body, burns through her strength. If anyone pays the price, it will be her." "Then tell me what I need to do," Seraphina said. The woman stood. "Come. Let me show you what it means to carry power like this." She led them deeper into the ruins, to a chamber lit by crystals that pulsed with inner light. In the center was a pool filled with liquid that looked like molten silver. "The ancient ritual," the woman explained, "used by hidden truth queens when their power threatened to consume them. You submerge yourself. Let the silver bond with your blood. It will stabilize the child's power. But the process is agony.
and it will change you permanently. How? You will carry your child's power inside you for the rest of your life. Every emotion, every truth, every lie. You'll feel it all. There will be no peace, no quiet, just constant awareness of everything around you.
Seraphina looked at Cassian. His face was pale. "Don't," he said. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." She turned back to the woman. "When do we start?" "Now. If we wait, the child's power will grow too strong to contain." Seraphina started removing her clothes. Cassian grabbed her arm. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She cupped his face. "This is what love costs. This is the price, and I'm willing to pay it." "Then let me—" "You can't." She kissed him gently. "This one's mine." She stepped into the pool. The silver liquid was ice cold. It burned like acid. She gasped as it climbed her body, seeping into her pores, invading her bloodstream. Then the real pain started. It felt like being torn apart from the inside, every nerve screaming, every cell burning. She tried to scream, but liquid filled her mouth, her lungs, drowning her in silver fire. Through it all, she felt the child inside her, its power thrashing, fighting, trying to break free. She grabbed onto it with everything she had. "Not today," she thought. "You don't get to kill me today." The child's power surged one final time, and then went quiet, stabilized, bound to her through silver and blood and will too stubborn to break. Seraphina surfaced, gasping. The silver liquid had bonded with her skin, leaving intricate patterns across her arms and throat like living tattoos. Cassian pulled her from the pool, wrapping her in his cloak. His hands shook as he checked for injuries. "I'm okay," she gasped. "We're okay." The woman nodded. "The child is stabilized. But remember, the power lives in you now, forever. There is no going back." Seraphina looked at the silver patterns on her skin. "I can live with that." They stayed in the ruins for 3 days while she recovered. On the third night, Cassian found her standing in the moonlight, one hand on her stomach, staring at the silver marks covering her arms. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "No." She turned to face him. "This is what I chose. This is what it cost. And I'd do it again." He pulled her close. "I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you have me anyway." They returned to the capital to find the empire on the brink of civil war. The nobles had moved the moment Cassian left, declaring the throne abandoned. They'd installed a puppet king, Morganthy's nephew, and were already dismantling the reforms. But they hadn't counted on one thing: the people. Common folk had risen up across the territories, not in organized rebellion, just in quiet refusal to accept the return of the old system. Merchants closed their shops, farmers withheld their harvests, workers laid down their tools. A general strike that brought the empire to a standstill. And when Cassian rode back through the capital gates, the streets erupted, not in violence, in celebration. Because for the first time in generations, people believed their king actually gave a damn whether they lived or died. The puppet king surrendered without a fight. The nobles who had supported him fled or bent the knee. And Cassian reclaimed his throne without spilling a single drop of blood. That night, he stood on the palace balcony, looking out at a city lit by celebration fires. Seraphina joined him, her silver-marked hand resting on her swollen belly. "We did it," she said quietly. "Did we?" His voice was tired. "Or did we just buy ourselves more time before the next crisis? Maybe both. But that's enough for now." The baby kicked hard enough that Cassian felt it through her dress. His hand covered hers. And for the first time in his life, Cassian Drakhar believed that maybe, just maybe, the future could be something other than survival. Maybe it could be hope. The city burned with light below them. Not destruction this time, celebration. And in the shadows of the palace, in chambers deep underground, Malrek Drakhar sat alone in his cell and realized that his son had finally broken free. Not through violence, through choosing something more important than vengeance. The old king's laughter echoed through the empty corridors. But this time, nobody was listening. The child was born during a blood moon. Seraphina's screams echoed through the royal chambers while physicians worked with hands slick with silver-tinged blood. The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of agony that felt like the universe was tearing itself apart. Cassian stood beside her the entire time, his hand crushed in her grip, watching helplessly as the woman he loved fought a battle he couldn't help her win. When the baby finally came, the room went silent. Not because something was wrong, because something was impossible. The child's eyes opened immediately. Not the cloudy, unfocused gaze of newborns. Clear, alert, ancient, and glowing with the same silver light that marked Seraphina's skin. The head physician wrapped the baby in cloth with shaking hands. "A girl, Your Majesty. Healthy, strong." Cassian took his daughter carefully, like she might shatter if he held her wrong. She was tiny, impossibly fragile. But the power radiating from her made the air itself feel heavy. "She's beautiful," he whispered. The baby's silver eyes tracked to his face. And for one impossible moment, Cassian could have sworn she recognized him. Seraphina reached for her with exhausted arms. "Let me see her." Cassian placed the child against her chest. The moment their skin touched, the silver marks on Seraphina's arms blazed bright enough to light the entire room, then faded. The physician gasped. "The bond. It's complete." "What does that mean?" Cassian demanded. "It means," the physician said carefully, "that the child's power is now tied to the queen. Whatever the girl feels, the mother will sense. Whatever truth the child sees, the mother will know. They're connected, permanently." Seraphina looked down at her daughter with tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one. I'm your mother, and I would burn the world to keep you safe." The baby's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, and Cassian felt something crack open inside his chest that he hadn't known was still sealed shut. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind he'd been clinging to for months. Real hope. Solid. Unshakable. For the first time in his entire life, Cassian Drakhar believed the future could be better than the past. He was wrong, but he didn't know that yet. They named her Liana, after Cassian's mother, the woman who had tried to save him, who had died protecting the possibility that he could be more than what his father made him. The announcement was met with celebration across the empire. Bells rang in every city, feasts were held in every territory. For 3 days, the Iron Dominion put aside its conflicts and celebrated new life. But in the shadows, other forces were already moving. The first warning came 2 weeks after the birth. Cassian was in a council meeting when a messenger burst through the doors, face pale and gasping for breath. "Your Majesty, the southern border. There's been an incident." "What kind of incident?" "A village. Burned to the ground. Everyone dead, women, children, all of them." The room went cold. "Raiders?" Cassian asked. The messenger shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. This was organized. Military. And they left a message." "What message?" "They nailed a declaration to the town gate. It says the Hidden Truth bloodline is an abomination, that the child must be destroyed to protect the empire from corruption." Silence crashed through the chamber like a physical force. Cassian stood slowly. His voice came out deadly calm. "Who signed it?" The messenger's hands trembled as he unfolded a blood-stained parchment. "Lord Admiral Kess, commander of the Southern Fleet." Kess had survived the purge after Valor's coup. Cassian had allowed him to keep his position because his loyalty to the Empire seemed genuine, because he had opposed Valor's methods even while agreeing with his concerns about weakness. Apparently that loyalty had limits. Cassian's fist slammed into the table hard enough to crack the wood. "Assemble the military council, now, and someone get the queen. She needs to hear this." Within the hour, they had gathered in the war room. Maps covered every surface. Markers indicated troop positions, supply lines, fortified positions. Seraphina stood beside Cassian, the baby sleeping in her arms, while military commanders outlined the situation. "Kess has taken control of the entire Southern Fleet," one general reported. 30 warships, 5,000 soldiers. He's declared the child a threat to imperial stability and called for her to be surrendered to his custody for the safety of the realm. "Custody," Cassian said flatly. "He means execution." The general nodded grimly. "How many houses have joined him?" Seraphina asked. 3 so far. Minor nobility. But if he gains momentum, he won't! Cassian's voice cut through the speculation like a blade. "I'll lead the army south myself. We end this before it spreads." "Your Majesty, you can't!"
Another commander stepped forward. If you leave the capital now, other houses will see opportunity. The empire is still fragile. Your presence here is what keeps the peace. Then the peace will have to survive without me. Cassian turned to Seraphina. You'll stay here. Protected. I'll leave half the royal guard. No. Her voice was steel. If you're going to war over our daughter, I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You just gave birth 2 weeks ago. You're still recovering. I'm connected to her now. The silver bond means I can sense threats before they manifest. You need that advantage. What I need is for you both to be safe. Seraphina's eyes blazed. And what I need is to not sit in a palace wondering if my husband is dying while men try to murder my child. We go together or you don't go at all. The commanders shifted uncomfortably, waiting to see if their king would bend. Cassian's jaw worked. Then he turned to the generals. Prepare for departure at dawn. Full military escort, and double the guard on the queen and child. The march south took 6 days. They moved with an army of 3,000 soldiers, enough to make a statement but small enough to move quickly. Everywhere they passed, people came out to watch. Some cheered, others just stared, a few threw stones. The message Kess had spread was working, poisoning minds, making people afraid of what the child represented. Change. Real change. The kind that threatened every comfortable power structure that had existed for generations. On the 4th night, they made camp near a river. Cassian walked the perimeter himself, checking defenses, making sure guards were alert. He found Seraphina sitting by the water, the baby cradled against her chest. You should be resting, he said. So should you. She didn't look up. But neither of us will until this is over. He sat beside her. His hand found hers. I'm sorry I brought you into this. Don't. She squeezed his fingers. I chose this. Knowing what it meant. Knowing what it would cost. You didn't know they'd try to kill our daughter? No. But I knew having her would make us targets. Power always does. Especially power that threatens the status quo. The baby stirred, making a soft sound. Seraphina adjusted her position, and the silver marks on her arms pulsed faintly. Does it hurt? Cassian asked. The bond? Sometimes. It's like feeling her emotions layered over mine. Right now she's content, fed, warm, safe. But if she's frightened or in pain, I feel that too. Amplified. That sounds exhausting. It is. But it's also the most profound connection I've ever experienced. Like we're 2 parts of the same person now. Cassian studied his daughter's face. She had Seraphina's nose, his jawline, but those eyes were entirely her own, silver and ancient and unsettling. What do you think she sees? He asked quietly. Truth, all of it, every lie, every hidden motive, every secret we think we're keeping. That's a terrible gift. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what this empire needs, someone who can't be manipulated, who sees through the performance to what people really are. A scream cut through the night. Cassian was on his feet instantly, sword drawn. More screams followed, the clash of steel, shouts of alarm spreading through the camp like wildfire. They're attacking, Cassian said. Get to the command tent, now. Seraphina ran, clutching Liana tight. Guards surrounded her immediately, forming a protective circle as they moved through chaos. Men fought in the darkness, impossible to tell attacker from defender in the confusion. Fire spread through tents, horses screamed and broke their tethers. Then someone grabbed Seraphina from behind, a knife pressed against her throat. Don't move. She froze. Her attacker dragged her backward, away from the guards who were too busy fighting to notice, away from the fires, into the forest. When they were far enough from camp, he shoved her to the ground. Seraphina rolled, clutching Liana protectively. When she looked up, she saw her attacker clearly for the first time. It was one of Cassian's own guards, a man who had sworn loyalty, who had eaten at their table, who had protected them for months. Why? She gasped. The guard's face was twisted with something between shame and conviction. Because Admiral Kess is right. That child is an abomination, a threat to everything the Empire stands for, and if the king won't do what's necessary, someone has to. He raised his blade. Seraphina's silver marks blazed. The moment the guard looked into her eyes, she saw everything. His childhood, his fears, his secret resentment of the changes Cassian had made, his belief that strength required cruelty.
and she saw the exact words Kess had used to turn him, to convince him that murdering an infant was somehow noble. The guard hesitated. Just for a second. It was enough. Cassian exploded from the trees, tackling him with enough force to shatter bone. They hit the ground hard. The guard's blade went flying. Cassian shifted partially into his alpha form, claws extending, golden eyes blazing with rage so profound it felt like being in the presence of a natural disaster. "You tried to kill my family," he snarled. The guard was gasping, blood streaming from his mouth where he'd bitten his tongue in the impact. "I did what was right, what needed to be done." Cassian's claws dug into the man's chest. "Right? You call murdering a child right? She's not a child, she's a weapon, and weapons need to be controlled or destroyed." For a moment, Seraphina thought Cassian would tear him apart. She saw the violence building in him, the old instincts, the brutal efficiency he'd learned from a lifetime of survival. Then Cassian stopped, his claws retracted. He shifted back to human form, and he did something that shocked everyone, including himself. He let the guard live. "You're going to stand trial," Cassian said. "Public. Transparent. Every charge laid out. Every piece of evidence examined. And if you're found guilty, you'll be executed according to law. Not by my rage, by justice." The guard stared at him in disbelief. "You've gone soft." "No." Cassian stood, pulling Seraphina to her feet. "I've gotten smarter. Killing you in anger makes me the monster they say I am. Giving you a fair trial proves I'm something different." He gestured to the soldiers who had followed him into the forest. "Take him. Chain him. If he tries to escape, you have permission to stop him. Permanently." They dragged the guard away. When they were alone, Seraphina touched Cassian's face. "You're shaking. I almost killed him. Right in front of you, in front of her. But you didn't. That doesn't make it better. The impulse was there. The desire. I wanted to tear him apart, and part of me still does." "The part that's been trained to survive through violence," Seraphina said gently. "But that's not the only part of you anymore." "How do you know?" "Because the old you wouldn't have hesitated." They returned to camp to find the attack had been repelled. 15 attackers dead, 20 captured, all of them wearing the insignia of houses loyal to Admiral Kess. "This wasn't random," one of the commanders reported. "This was coordinated. They knew exactly where we'd be camped, exactly where the Queen would be positioned." Cassian's expression went cold. "We have another leak. Or Kess has better intelligence than we thought. Either way, we're not safe here. We break camp immediately, move through the night, and from now on, nobody knows our route except me." Check. They reached the southern coast 3 days later. Admiral Kess had fortified his position on a peninsula jutting into the sea. 30 warships sat at anchor, their crews visible on deck. Soldiers lined the cliffs, armed with crossbows and enough supplies to withstand a siege for months. Cassian studied the defenses through a spyglass. He's dug in deep. Attacking directly would cost thousands of lives. "Then we negotiate," Seraphina said. "He won't negotiate. He thinks he's saving the Empire. Then we make him see he's wrong." Cassian lowered the spyglass. "How?" "I go talk to him. Alone." "Absolutely not. That's suicide." "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to end this without a massacre." Cassian's hands clenched. "I can't risk you. Either of you. You're already risking us. Every day this goes on, more people die. More houses choose sides. The Empire tears itself apart. But if I can reach him, make him see what he's really fighting for, maybe we can stop it. And if he kills you the moment you set foot in his camp, then you burn his entire fleet to ash, and make sure everyone knows what happens when someone murders your family." The bluntness of it caught him off guard. Seraphina's expression softened. "I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too, but hiding from fear doesn't make us safe. It just makes us prisoners of it." Cassian was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his commanders. "Arrange a parley. Under flag of truce, the Queen wishes to speak with Admiral Kess." They met on neutral ground, a beach halfway between the two armies, stripped of weapons, surrounded by witnesses from both sides. Admiral Kess was older than Seraphina expected, weathered, scarred, the kind of man who had spent his life at sea, fighting storms and enemies with equal determination. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing slightly,
I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you not having me shot the moment I arrived. That would violate the terms of parley. Kess gestured to a makeshift table someone had set up. Shall we sit? They settled across from each other. Lyanna slept in Seraphina's arms, peaceful and oblivious to the danger. Kess stared at the child for a long moment. She looks normal. She is normal. She's a baby, with the power to tear minds apart from the inside, with the ability to force truth on people whether they want it or not. That's not normal. That's dangerous. So is fire. But we don't destroy every flame because it might burn us. We learn to control it, to use it properly. Fire doesn't have consciousness, doesn't make choices. That child will grow up with power no human should have. And history shows us what happens when people have too much power. They become tyrants, monsters. Like King Cassian? Seraphina's voice was sharp. Kess had the grace to look uncomfortable. His Majesty has made efforts to change. I acknowledge that. But those changes have made the Empire weak, vulnerable. Our enemies sense it. Soon they'll attack. And when they do, compassion won't save us. Strength will. You think killing an infant makes you strong? I think preventing a future tyrant makes me responsible. Then you don't understand power at all. Seraphina leaned forward. Power doesn't corrupt people. Fear does. Fear of losing what they have, fear of becoming vulnerable, fear of being seen for what they really are. My daughter doesn't make people corrupt. She exposes corruption that already exists, which is exactly why she's dangerous. Kess's voice hardened. The Empire runs on necessary lies, on comfortable fictions that keep society functioning. What happens when someone with the power to strip away all pretense grows up? When she can force anyone to confront truths they've spent their lives avoiding? Maybe, Seraphina said quietly, we become better people. Or maybe we tear ourselves apart. They sat in silence for a moment. Waves crashed against the shore. Gulls cried overhead. In the distance, thousands of soldiers watched and waited to see if this would end in peace or blood. I had a daughter once, Kess said finally. His voice had gone soft. She was killed during one of King Malrek's purges. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong bloodline. She was 6 years old. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was 20 years ago. But I learned something from it. Power protects itself. Always, no matter who gets hurt. Your daughter isn't evil, but the power inside her is. And eventually, that power will do what power always does. It will corrupt, control, consume. Or, Seraphina said, she'll learn to use it to help people, to protect the vulnerable, to build something better. You really believe that? I have to. Because the alternative is accepting that the world can't change, that cruelty is inevitable, that we're all doomed to repeat the mistakes of those who came before us. And I refuse to believe that. Kess studied her for a long moment. Then he stood. I can see why the king loves you. You have the kind of hope that men like him need to survive. But hope doesn't win wars, strategy does. And my strategy is to remove the threat before it can manifest. Then we're done here. I'm afraid so. Seraphina stood, clutching Lyanna tighter. If you attack us, Cassian will destroy you. You know that. Probably. But some things are worth dying for. Like murdering a child? Like protecting the Empire from a future it can't survive. He turned and walked away. Seraphina returned to Cassian's camp knowing the parley had failed. Knowing war was inevitable. Cassian took one look at her face and knew it too. When do they attack? Dawn. Maybe sooner. Then we fortify positions and prepare for siege. We can outlast them if we... No. Seraphina's voice was hollow. We can't. He has the ocean, unlimited supplies. We're sitting in hostile territory with supply lines that stretch hundreds of miles. Time is on his side. Then what do you suggest? I don't know. She looked down at Lyanna. But I know I won't let them kill her, no matter what it costs. That night, Cassian barely slept. He spent hours pacing the command tent, studying maps, running scenarios. Every option ended badly. Storm the fortifications and lose thousands. Retreat and look weak. Try to wait them out and slowly starve. No good choices, just different flavors of failure. He was still pacing when a guard entered, face pale. Your Majesty, there's someone here to see you. They claim to have information about Admiral Kess. Who? They won't say, but they're wearing the uniform of Kess's fleet,
A deserter, or a trap. Cassian followed the guard outside. A figure stood in the shadows, cloaked and hooded. When they pulled back the hood, Cassian's blood went cold. It was Duke Harrow's younger brother, the one who had survived the purge, the one Cassian had allowed to keep his lands and title because he had opposed Vaelor's coup. "You," Cassian said. "Why are you here? Why are you—" "Because I'm tired of watching this empire eat itself." The young duke's voice was steady. "Kess is planning something big, and you need to know about it. Talk. He's not going to attack your army. He's going to bypass you completely. Tomorrow night, while you're focused on his fortifications, he's sending his fastest ships north. They'll sail around your position and head straight for the capital. The capital is defended. Not well enough. Not against 30 warships and 5,000 soldiers hitting it simultaneously. By the time you march back, the city will be burning, and Kess will have exactly what he wants, which is to force your surrender. He's betting you'll trade yourself and the child to save the capital, to save the thousands of innocent people who'll die if he sacks it." Cassian felt something cold settle into his chest. That's not a military strategy. That's terrorism. It's effective. The Duke stepped closer. "But I can help you stop it. I know his fleet positions, his planned routes, his weaknesses. I can give you everything you need to sink every ship before they leave the harbor." "Why would you help me?" "Because Kess is wrong." The Duke's expression was grim. "I've seen what your reforms have done. The schools, the hospitals, the opportunity. My younger sister is studying medicine because of changes you made. She'd have been married off to some cruel old lord under the old system. Maybe I don't agree with everything you've done, but I'd rather live in an empire trying to be better than one convinced cruelty is strength." Cassian studied him, looking for deception, finding only exhaustion and conviction. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing. Just stop this before more people die." It could be a trap. Cassian knew that. The Duke could be feeding him false information, leading him into an ambush, but if he was telling the truth and Cassian did nothing, the capital would burn. Some choices weren't really choices at all. "Show me the maps," Cassian said. Nets. The plan was insane. They would take a small force, 200 of the best fighters, and infiltrate Kess's harbor under cover of darkness. They'd board his ships while the crews slept and set fire to the fleet from within. Chaos, surprise, violence, the old Cassian specialty. "You can't go yourself," Seraphina argued. "If something goes wrong, then I die doing what I do best." Cassian was already strapping on armor. "This is my strength, close combat, brutal efficiency. You said it yourself, I'm a weapon, time to remember how to be sharp. What about us? What about Lyanna? You stay here, protected. If I don't come back, you take the army and retreat north. You survive. And if Kess's fleet escapes anyway, then you've got a head start." She grabbed his arm. "Don't do this. Don't throw yourself at danger because you think you deserve to die." "I don't think I deserve to die. I think I deserve to protect my family. There's a difference." He pulled her close, kissing her hard enough to hurt. Then he pressed his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "Both of you. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything. And I'll burn the world before I let anyone hurt you. Then come back. Because we need you. I'll try." He left before she could argue further. The infiltration happened just after midnight. 200 soldiers in dark clothing, moving silently through shallow water, climbing up anchor chains and boarding ships while crews slept below deck. Cassian led from the front. They moved through the flagship like shadows, eliminating sentries with brutal efficiency. No alarms, no warnings, just silent deaths in the darkness. Then they reached the powder magazine. Cassian set charges personally, his hand steady despite knowing that one mistake would blow them all to pieces. When the fuses were lit, they had minutes to escape. They ran. Behind them, the flagship erupted in a fireball that lit up the night sky like a second sun. The explosion chain-reacted through the fleet, ship after ship catching fire. Spreading, consuming, men screamed, dove into the ocean, burned alive or drowned trying to escape. It was brutal, effective. Exactly what Cassian had been trained to do. But as he watched the fleet burn, he felt nothing but hollow emptiness. This was who he had been, who he still was when pushed hard enough. A destroyer. They made it back to shore as dawn broke.
The entire southern fleet was gone, reduced to burning wreckage and bodies floating in water stained red. Admiral Kess stood on the cliff, watching his life's work burn. When Cassian approached, the old admiral didn't run, didn't fight. He just looked tired. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "I thought you'd gone soft, forgotten how to be ruthless. But you're still your father's son after all." The words hit like a blade. "No," Cassian said. "My father would have burned the crews in their sleep. I gave them a chance to escape. Most made it." Most. Kess's laugh was bitter. "But not all. War has casualties. Is that what you tell yourself? To sleep at night?" Cassian's hands clenched. "I tell myself I protected my family, that I stopped you from murdering my daughter and sacking my capital, that I did what was necessary." Necessary. Kess shook his head. "That's what they all say. Every tyrant, every monster. It was necessary. It was justified. It was for the greater good." "Then tell me," Cassian said quietly, "what I should have done differently. Let you kill my child? Let you burn the capital? What choice did you leave me? The choice to prove you were different, to find another way, to be better than what we expect you to be. I tried that. You responded by trying to murder my family, because I don't believe people change. Not really. They just pretend until circumstances force them to show their true nature. And tonight, you showed yours." The accusation landed heavier than it should have, because part of Cassian knew Kess was right. He had defaulted to violence the moment he was pushed, had reverted to the brutal efficiency his father had beaten into him, had become exactly what he spent years trying not to be. "Your Majesty." Cassian turned. A messenger stood there, pale and gasping. "From the capital, urgent." "What happened?" "While you were attacking the fleet, another force moved on the city. They've taken the palace, killed the guards, and they're holding position." "Who?" The messenger's voice cracked. "Lord Chancellor Morganthy's family. They escaped execution. They've been hiding, planning, and now they've taken your throne." The world tilted. "What about the city?" "Intact. They're not attacking civilians, just securing strategic positions. Waiting." "For what?" The messenger held out a sealed letter. "For you to come home and negotiate." Cassian tore open the seal, read the contents. His face went white. "They want me to surrender myself and the child," he said hollowly, "in exchange for the city. If I refuse, they start executing civilians. 10 per hour until I comply." Seraphina had joined them, Liana in her arms. "How long do we have?" 24 hours. Then the executions begin." Kess laughed. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. "You see, this is what happens when you try to change things. The old powers don't disappear. They just wait. And when you're vulnerable, they strike." Cassian ignored him. He turned to his commanders. "How fast can we march?" 5 days. Maybe 4 if we push hard." "We don't have 4 days." "Then what do you suggest?" Silence. Because there was no good answer. Go back and arrive too late to save anyone. Stay and let civilians die. Surrender and lose everything. The Empire had finally cornered him, forced him into a choice where every option was failure. Seraphina touched his arm. "Whatever you're thinking, don't. I have to go back. I have to try to save them. They'll kill you the moment you arrive." "Maybe. But at least I tried." "And what about Liana? What about our daughter? She'll have you. You'll protect her. Teach her. Show her how to be better than I was. Don't you dare." Seraphina's voice broke. "Don't you dare martyr yourself because you think that's what you deserve. It's not about what I deserve. It's about what's right." "Right?" She laughed bitterly. "There's nothing right about any of this. We've been backed into a corner by people who want us dead. There are no good choices. Just different ways to fail." "Then tell me what to do." She looked at him, really looked. And he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Not fear, rage. "We changed the game," she said quietly. "How?" "We stop playing by their rules. Stop trying to be merciful and just and fair when they're using our compassion as a weapon against us. We become what we need to be to survive." "And what's that?" "Ruthless." The word hung between them like a confession. Cassian stared at the woman he loved, the woman who had taught him that mercy wasn't weakness, Who had believed he could be better than what his father made him? And now she was telling him to embrace the monster again. "You don't mean that," he said. "I do." Seraphina's silver marks blazed. "Because I've seen the truth. I know what these people are, what they want, and they won't stop until we're dead. So we stop giving them chances, stop trying to prove we're different. We survive. By any means necessary. That's not who you are. Maybe it wasn't. But it's who I need to be. For her." She looked down at Liana. "I won't let them kill our daughter because we were too noble to do what needed doing." Cassian felt something break inside him, not in rage, in grief, because she was right, and hating that she was right changed nothing. He turned to his commanders. "Prepare the army. We march on the capital. No prisoners, no mercy. Anyone who stands between us and our throne dies." The commanders saluted and left. When they were alone, Cassian pulled Seraphina close. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I brought you to this. Don't apologize for surviving." She kissed him gently. "We'll do what we have to. We'll save our empire, protect our daughter, and when it's over, we'll figure out how to live with what we've become." The march north began within the hour. Behind them, Admiral Kess remained on the cliff, watching them go. He had been wrong about one thing. Cassian hadn't become his father. He'd become something worse, a monster who knew exactly what he was and chose it anyway, not out of cruelty, out of love. And that made him far more dangerous than Malrek Drakhar had ever been. Because tyrants who believe they're evil can be stopped. But tyrants who believe they're protecting what they love will burn the entire world and call it justice. The army moved like a wound bleeding north. 3,000 soldiers marching double time through hostile territory, pushing past exhaustion into something darker. Desperation. The kind that turned men into weapons when survival became the only objective that mattered. Cassian rode at the front, his face a mask of stone, but Seraphina saw the truth beneath it. She always did now. The silver bond between her and Liana had sharpened her sight until she could read every micro-expression, every tension in his shoulders, every thought he tried to bury. He was terrified, not of battle, not of death, of what he was about to become. Because there's a difference between a man who kills because he has to and a man who kills because he's stopped caring about the cost. The first type can still come back from it. The second type becomes the thing nightmares are made of. And Cassian was walking that line with every mile they covered. On the second night, they made camp in the ruins of a village that had been destroyed during one of Malrek's purges. Burned foundations, collapsed walls, graves overgrown with weeds. A monument to cruelty disguised as strength. Cassian stood among the ruins, staring at nothing. Seraphina approached with Liana sleeping against her shoulder. The baby's silver eyes closed, but still somehow glowing faintly in the darkness. "Talk to me," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "I burned villages like this. When I was younger. When I thought that's what kings did." "I know. I told myself it was necessary. That rebels were hiding among civilians. That mercy would be seen as weakness. I had a dozen justifications. All of them lies. They weren't all lies. Some of them were probably true. That doesn't make it better." His hands clenched. "I look at these graves, and I see the people I killed, the children who burned because I was too afraid to look weak, and now I'm about to do it again." "No." Seraphina's voice was firm. "What you're about to do is protect your family. That's not the same thing, isn't it? We're marching on the capital with orders to kill anyone who resists. How many innocent people will die because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time? How many children will burn because I'm too desperate to be careful?" The question hung in the air like smoke, because that was the truth neither of them wanted to face. War didn't discriminate. It devoured everyone in its path. The guilty and the innocent, the soldiers and the bystanders, the monsters and the victims. And once you started that fire, you couldn't control where it spread. "Then we be as careful as we can," Seraphina said. "We minimize casualties. We offer surrender. We give people chances. And when they don't take them, then we do what we have to." Cassian finally looked at her. His eyes were haunted. "When did you become so hard?" "The moment someone threatened our daughter." She adjusted Liana's weight against her shoulder. "I told you before. I'll burn the world to keep her safe. I meant it. That's not who you were." "No, but it's who I am now." The silence between them was different than it used to be. Heavier.
like they were both mourning the people they'd been before the Empire forced them to evolve or die. In the distance, a soldier started singing, an old war ballad about men who marched to their deaths and the women who waited for them to return. Others joined in, rough voices harmonizing over the crackle of campfires. Cassian listened for a moment. Then he turned away from the ruins and led Seraphina back toward their tent. That night, he held her like she might disappear if he let go. And maybe she would, because the thing about walking through fire is that nothing comes out the other side unchanged. You either burn up completely or you become something harder, something that can withstand heat, something less human than what went in. They reached the capital on the fourth day. The city sprawled before them, massive and ancient, its walls scarred from centuries of conflict. Smoke rose from multiple districts. The gates were barred. Soldiers lined the ramparts, crossbows aimed at the approaching army. And hanging from the main gate, strung up like warnings, were the bodies of royal guards who had refused to surrender. Cassian's jaw worked as he studied the walls through his spyglass. They fortified every entrance. This isn't a hostage situation. This is a siege. Can we break through? One of his commanders asked. Eventually, but it'll cost thousands, and by the time we breach the walls, they'll have executed every civilian they're holding. So what do you suggest? Cassian lowered the spyglass. His expression was cold enough to freeze blood. We send them a message. Show them what happens when you threaten my family. What kind of message? The kind written in fire. He turned to his engineers. I want every siege weapon we have assembled within the hour. Catapults, ballistae, anything that can throw burning pitch over those walls. Target military structures only. Barracks, armories, command posts. Nothing residential. The engineer hesitated. Your Majesty, even with careful aim, fires spread. The city is densely packed. Once it starts burning, then they'll have incentive to surrender quickly. Cassian's voice was flat. You have your orders. The engineer saluted and left. Seraphina grabbed Cassian's arm. You can't do this. Those are your people in there. Those are hostages. And the only way to save them is to make the people holding them more afraid of me than they are confident in their position. By burning your own city? By showing I'm willing to. There's a difference. Is there? The question made him flinch. But he didn't back down. Yes. Because I'm giving them a choice. Surrender now and nobody burns. Refuse and I'll turn their fortifications to ash around them. They decide how this ends. And if they call your bluff? It's not a bluff. The siege weapons were assembled as the sun set. Massive wooden frames that creaked under the weight of stones and barrels of pitch. Men worked in organized chaos, following orders that would determine whether thousands lived or died. Cassian stood on a ridge overlooking the city, watching preparations with an expression that gave away nothing. Seraphina joined him, Liana bundled against the evening chill. The baby was awake, her silver eyes tracking movement with unsettling focus. She knows something's wrong, Seraphina said quietly. Cassian glanced at his daughter. Can she understand? Not with words, but she feels what I feel. And right now I'm terrified. Of me? Of what we're about to do, of what it'll make us, of whether we can come back from this. He pulled them both close. His arms formed a protective cage around his family. I don't know if we can, but I know I won't lose you, either of you, whatever that costs. A messenger approached, bowing quickly. Your Majesty, the siege weapons are ready. We await your command. Cassian took a breath, then nodded. Send an envoy under flag of truce. Tell whoever's commanding in there that they have 1 hour to release all hostages and surrender. If they refuse, we start firing. The messenger left. The hour that followed was the longest of Seraphina's life. She watched soldiers prepare, watched engineers adjust angles and double-check calculations, watched Cassian stand perfectly still, his hand resting on the sword he hadn't drawn yet, waiting for an answer that would determine how many people died today. When the messenger returned, his face was pale. They refused, he reported. They said King Cassian is a usurper who abandoned his throne to chase personal vendettas. They've declared Lord Chancellor Morganthy's nephew the rightful king, and they demand you surrender yourself and the child, or they'll execute 10 civilians every hour as promised. How long until the first execution? 20 minutes. Cassian's expression didn't change. Then we're out of time. He turned to the engineer. Fire! The first volley launched with a sound like thunder. Barrels of burning pitch arced through the air, trailing smoke, and crashed into the military district near the north wall. Explosions bloomed orange and red against the darkening sky. Flames spread across rooftops, hungry and unstoppable. The second volley followed. Then the third. Within minutes, the northern quarter was burning. Screams echoed from inside the walls. Not just soldiers, civilians. People who had been trapped when the coup happened. People who were now burning because their king had run out of better options. Seraphina felt each scream like a blade through her chest. The silver bond amplified everything. Liana's distress, the terror radiating from the city, the weight of thousands of people suffering because of choices made by men too proud to surrender. She looked at Cassian. His face was stone, but she saw his hands shaking. He was breaking inside, piece by piece, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The gates opened after the fifth volley, not to surrender, to attack. Soldiers poured out in desperate waves, charging the siege lines with the kind of recklessness that came from knowing you were already dead. They screamed battle cries that sounded more like grief than rage. Cassian's army met them head-on. The clash was brutal, steel on steel, men dying in the mud while fires raged behind them. Blood soaked the ground until it looked like the earth itself was bleeding. Cassian shifted into his alpha form and waded into the fight. He was magnificent, terrifying, a force of nature given claws and rage and purpose. Men fell before him like wheat before a scythe. His roar echoed across the battlefield loud enough to shake the walls. This was who he had been before Seraphina, before hope, before he believed he could be anything other than a weapon. And watching him revert to it felt like watching someone drown. The battle lasted 3 hours. By the time it ended, the field was carpeted with bodies. The northern quarter of the city was still burning, and Cassian stood in the center of the carnage, covered in blood that wasn't his, breathing hard, his golden eyes tracking for threats that no longer existed. Slowly, he shifted back to human form. The silence that followed was worse than the screaming had been, because silence meant it was over, meant they had won, meant the cost could finally be counted. 2,000 enemy dead, 500 of Cassian's soldiers, uncounted civilians caught in fires that were still burning, and the hostages? Still trapped inside. A commander approached, his armor dented and blood-stained. "Your Majesty, the gates are breached. We can enter the city." Cassian nodded. "Do it. Sweep every district. Anyone wearing military insignia who doesn't immediately surrender gets put down. Everyone else gets escorted to safety." "What about the rebel leadership? Bring them to me, alive." The commander saluted and moved out. Cassian stood there for a moment longer. Then his legs gave out. He hit the ground hard, catching himself on his hands. Blood dripped from his claws, pooling in the mud beneath him. Seraphina was at his side immediately. Liana clutched to her chest with one arm while the other wrapped around Cassian's shoulders. "I killed them," he whispered. His voice was raw. "All of them. Men who were just following orders, doing what they thought was right. They were trying to kill you. That doesn't make it better." He looked at his hands. His claws were still extended, still dripping. "I've become my father. The thing I swore I'd never be." "No." Seraphina forced him to look at her. "Your father enjoyed it. You're breaking. That's the difference. What if breaking isn't enough? What if... Then we figure it out, together. But first we finish this." She helped him stand. Together, they entered the burning city. The palace was a war zone. Bodies littered the marble floors. Tapestries hung in burning shreds. The throne room had been barricaded and fortified, turned into a makeshift command center. And sitting on Cassian's throne, wearing a crown that didn't belong to him, was Lord Morganthe's nephew. A boy barely 20 years old with soft hands and eyes that had never seen real violence until today. He was surrounded by the last of his personal guard, maybe 30 men, all of them knowing they were dead but refusing to abandon their posts. Cassian walked through the destroyed palace with Seraphina at his side. Soldiers flanked them, weapons drawn, ready. When they entered the throne room, every crossbow and blade turned toward them. The boy on the throne stood. His voice shook but held. "King Cassian, you've come to reclaim what you abandoned." "I abandoned nothing." Cassian's voice was dead. "I defended my family from men who tried to murder my infant daughter." "That's not abandonment. That's survival." You left the capital vulnerable. Your reforms weakened the empire. You chose personal concerns over your duty to the throne. My duty is to protect my people. All of them. Not just the ones who benefit from corruption and cruelty. The boy's hands clenched. You killed thousands tonight. Burned your own city. That's not protection, that's tyranny. No. Seraphina's voice cut through the tension. Tyranny is executing civilians to force a king's surrender. Tyranny is using innocent people as shields. What happened tonight is on you. You had a choice. You chose wrong. The boy's face went pale, but he didn't back down. I did what I thought was right, what my family believed was necessary, and I won't apologize for it. Cassian studied him, seeing not an enemy, just a kid who'd been manipulated by adults with their own agendas, who'd been convinced that violence in service of the old order was somehow noble. It was like looking in a mirror. How old are you? Cassian asked. 21. When I was 21, I'd already killed my own brothers, burned rebel strongholds, executed prisoners who begged for mercy, and I did it all because men like your uncle told me it was what strong kings did. That compassion was weakness. The boy said nothing. They were wrong, Cassian continued. Strength isn't the ability to hurt people. It's the ability to protect them even when it costs you everything. To choose mercy when vengeance would be easier. To build instead of destroy. Then why did you burn the city? Because you left me no choice, Cassian's voice hardened. I gave you an hour to surrender. You refused. You murdered hostages. You forced this. And now you get to live with what that decision cost. So what happens now? You execute me? Make an example? No. Cassian gestured to his guards. Take him. Trial. Public. Transparent. If he's found guilty, the sentence will be carried out according to law. The boy's guards lowered their weapons. They knew when they were beaten. As soldiers led the boy away, he looked back at Cassian. You think you're different? You think burning your own city to get what you want makes you better than your father? The question hit like a blade. Cassian didn't have an answer. Because maybe the boy was right. Maybe there was no real difference between a tyrant who enjoyed cruelty and a tyrant who committed it out of desperation. Maybe they both ended up in the same place, covered in blood and standing among ruins they helped create. Fine. The fires burned for 3 days. By the time they were finally extinguished, the northern quarter was ash. 2,000 civilian casualties, 5,000 left homeless, infrastructure destroyed that would take years to rebuild. The cost of keeping a throne. Cassian ordered relief efforts immediately. Food, shelter, medical care for the wounded. He walked the destroyed districts personally, helping clear rubble, speaking with survivors, looking into the faces of people who had lost everything because their king had chosen violence over negotiation. Some spat at him, others just turned away. A few thanked him for ending the coup quickly, but most just looked broken, like they'd survived something that had fundamentally changed what it meant to live in the Iron Dominion. Like they'd learned that even good intentions could pave roads straight to hell. On the 4th day, Cassian called an assembly. Every noble who hadn't fled or been arrested was required to attend. Common people were invited. The city square filled with thousands, all of them waiting to hear what their king would say. Cassian stood on a platform above them. No crown, no royal regalia, just plain clothes and exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Seraphina stood beside him with Liana in her arms. The baby's silver eyes were open, watching the crowd with that unsettling awareness that made people uncomfortable. Cassian spoke without preamble. 3 days ago, this city burned. Thousands died. Not because they were rebels or traitors, but because they were caught between forces they couldn't control. And I'm responsible for that. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could tell you it was necessary, Cassian continued, that I had no choice, that the coup leaders forced my hand, and all of that would be true. But it doesn't change the result. You lost homes, family, livelihoods, because I chose violence when maybe there was another way. He paused, letting the word settle. I won't apologize for protecting my family. I won't apologize for defending my throne from men who would have returned us to the old ways. But I will acknowledge the cost, and I will spend the rest of my reign trying to rebuild what was destroyed. Someone in the crowd shouted, How? With more wars, more burnings? No. Cassian's voice was firm. with the same reforms I started before this happened. Schools, infrastructure, opportunity, a government that represents all territories, not just noble houses. I'm going to finish what I started. And if you want to hold me accountable, there will be elections. Representatives chosen by you. People who can challenge the throne when it oversteps. The crowd went silent, because that wasn't how empires worked. Kings didn't offer accountability. They demanded obedience. But Cassian wasn't finished. I'm also dissolving the hereditary council permanently. From now on, advisors will be chosen based on merit and confirmed by territorial representatives. The military will be restructured to prevent any single commander from having enough power to stage a coup. And there will be independent tribunals to investigate abuses of power. He paused. Including mine. The silence stretched. Then someone started clapping. It started slow, uncertain, but it spread. Within moments, the entire square was applauding, not with the forced enthusiasm of subjects ordered to show loyalty, with genuine hope, because they'd just watched their king admit he was wrong, watched him take responsibility, watched him offer to share power instead of hoarding it, and that was unprecedented. Seraphina leaned close. You just changed everything. Or I started a revolution I can't control. Maybe both. She smiled. But at least it's interesting. That night, they stood together on the palace balcony overlooking the city. Fires still smoldered in the northern quarter, but reconstruction had already begun. People working together to rebuild what had been destroyed. Cassian held his daughter for the first time since the battle. Liana looked up at him with those ancient silver eyes, and he felt the weight of everything she represented. Power, truth, the future. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to be a father when I'm barely holding myself together as a king. Then we learn, Seraphina said. We make mistakes. We fix them. We try not to repeat them. What if I repeat the same mistakes my father made? Then I'll be there to stop you. He looked at her, really looked, seeing the silver marks that covered her arms, the exhaustion in her eyes, the strength that had carried her through fire and blood and betrayal. I love you, he said. I know. She leaned against him. And I love you, even when you're broken, even when you make terrible choices, even when you become the monster to protect us. I don't want to be the monster. Then don't be. Choose differently tomorrow. It sounded so simple when she said it like that. But Cassian knew better. Knew that choices were only as good as the circumstances that forced them. And in an empire built on violence, peaceful choices were luxuries only afforded to people strong enough to defend them. He was about to respond when a guard appeared, bowing quickly. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but there's been a development. What kind of development? The guard's face was pale. It's Malrek, Your Majesty. Your father. He's escaped. The world stopped. What? During the coup. Someone released him from the catacombs. We've been searching for 3 days, but there's no trace. He's gone. Cassian's blood went cold. Who released him? We don't know. The guards who were stationed there were found dead, their throats slit. Whoever did it knew exactly where to go and how to avoid patrols. Seraphina's hand found his. Her grip was tight enough to hurt. What does this mean? It means, Cassian said quietly, that the monster who made me is loose somewhere in the Empire. Probably gathering followers, definitely planning something. Can we find him? Eventually, but he's had 3 days to disappear. He could be anywhere. Then we hunt him. Cassian looked at her, at their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, at the city slowly rebuilding below them. No, he said. We fortify. We strengthen our position. We make the Empire strong enough that when he comes for us, and he will come, we're ready. You think he'll attack? I know he will, because that's what he does. He finds weakness and exploits it, and right now, we're wounded, vulnerable. Exactly the kind of target he's spent his entire life learning to destroy. So what do we do? Cassian's expression hardened. We prepare for war, not against external enemies, against the man who's been pulling strings in this empire for 50 years, the architect of everything wrong with the Iron Dominion. He turned to the guard. Summon the military council, alert every garrison. I want patrols doubled, intelligence networks activated, and I want every known associate of Malrek Drakhar investigated, anyone who might be helping him. The guards saluted and left.
When they were alone again, Seraphina spoke quietly. He's going to come for her. For Liana. I know. Because she represents everything he hates. Change, progress, the possibility of a future different from the past he built. Cassian pulled them both close. Then he'll have to go through me first. That's what he wants. To force you into becoming him. To prove that violence is the only real power. Then I'll prove him wrong. How? By surviving him. By protecting our family without losing myself. By showing that strength isn't just the ability to destroy, it's the ability to build something worth defending. Seraphina looked up at him. Do you really believe that? Cassian met her eyes. I have to. Because the alternative is accepting that he's right. That cruelty wins. That monsters can't change, and I refuse to believe that. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and threatening. And somewhere out there, hidden in shadows, Malrek Drakhar was planning his next move. Because the thing about monsters is they never really die. They just wait for the right moment to remind you that the darkness you escaped is never as far away as you want to believe. Cassian had spent his entire life running from his father's shadow. Now that shadow was coming for his daughter, and the only way to stop it was to finally confront the truth he'd been avoiding since the day his mother died. That some battles can't be won by being better than your enemy. Sometimes you have to become worse, at least for a little while, at least long enough to survive. The storm broke over the capital just after midnight. Rain hammered the city like bullets. Lightning split the sky. And in the catacombs beneath the palace, in the cell where Malrek had been kept for 20 years, someone had carved a message into the wall. Fresh. Recent. 3 words that promised violence. I'm coming home. The message carved into the catacomb wall haunted Cassian for weeks. I'm coming home. 3 words that promised violence. 3 words that carried the weight of decades of abuse and manipulation and cruelty disguised as education. 3 words from a man who had spent his entire life believing that suffering was the only teacher worth learning from. Malrek Drakhar was coming for his family, and Cassian had no idea when or how he would strike. The waiting was worse than any battle, worse than the coup, worse than burning his own city. Because, at least in those moments, there was action, movement, something to fight against. But waiting for a monster to emerge from shadows meant living in constant tension, always looking over your shoulder, always wondering if today would be the day everything came crashing down. Seraphina saw what it was doing to him, the way he barely slept anymore, the way his hand never strayed far from his weapons, the way he checked Liana's nursery 3 times a night, even though guards stood watch around the clock. He was unraveling, slowly, methodically, the way a rope frays one thread at a time, until suddenly it snaps under weight it used to carry easily. You can't keep doing this, she told him one night after finding him standing over their daughter's cradle at 3 a.m. You'll destroy yourself before he ever gets the chance. Cassian didn't look away from Liana. I can't lose her, either of you. I'd rather break than risk it. Breaking doesn't protect anyone. It just makes you easier to manipulate. Then tell me what to do. His voice cracked. Tell me how to fight an enemy I can't see. How to protect my family from a threat that could come from anywhere. You trust your people. You build systems strong enough to survive without you constantly holding them together. You accept that control is an illusion and the only real power is resilience. He finally looked at her. When did you become so wise? When I stopped pretending I had all the answers. She took his hand. Come back to bed, please, for an hour. Just rest. He let her lead him away from the nursery, but she felt the tension in his shoulders, the way every muscle remained coiled like he was expecting an attack at any second. This was what trauma did. It didn't just wound you in the moment. It taught your body to expect violence everywhere. Taught your mind that safety was a lie people told themselves before they got hurt. Taught you that the only way to survive was to never fully relax. And Malrek had spent Cassian's entire childhood making sure that lesson was carved deep enough to last a lifetime. The attack came 6 weeks after the message was discovered. Not with armies, not with violence, with words. Messengers arrived at every noble house in the empire carrying the same document. A declaration from Malrek Drakhar, former king, rightful ruler, calling his son a usurper who had abandoned the true values of the Iron Dominion, who had married an abomination.
who had created a monster child that would destroy the empire from within. The declaration was brutal in its efficiency. It didn't call for rebellion. It called for doubt, for questioning, for nobles to wonder if maybe the reforms had gone too far, if maybe Cassian's compassion was weakness after all, if maybe the old ways were better. And it worked. Not everywhere, not completely, but enough. Houses that had supported Cassian publicly started hedging their bets. Trade agreements stalled. Border territories sent messages asking for clarification on policies. Military recruitment slowed. Malrek wasn't attacking the throne directly. He was eroding the foundation beneath it, making people question whether the empire Cassian was building could actually survive. It was brilliant, calculated, exactly the kind of psychological warfare Malrek had perfected over 50 years of ruling through fear and manipulation. Cassian called an emergency council meeting. The new representatives from every territory gathered in the throne room, faces uncertain, waiting to see how their king would respond. He stood before them without his crown, without royal regalia. Just a man trying to hold together something that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. "You've all seen the declaration," he said. "You know what my father is trying to do? He's banking on the idea that doubt is stronger than belief, that fear is more powerful than hope, that the empire I'm trying to build is too fragile to survive scrutiny." No one spoke. But Cassian saw the uncertainty in their faces. "He's right about one thing," Cassian continued. "This empire is fragile. The reforms are new. The systems are untested. We're trying to do something that's never been done before. Build a government that represents people instead of controlling them. And that's scary, because it means giving up certainty for possibility." A representative from the Southern Territories stood. "Your Majesty, with respect, some of us are wondering if maybe there's wisdom and caution in not changing too much too fast. You want to know if we should slow down, stop the reforms, return to stability." The man nodded. Cassian took a breath. "Let me tell you about stability. My father's empire was stable. For 50 years. And in that stability, people starved while nobles feasted. Rebels were executed without trial. Entire villages burned for the crime of questioning authority. That's what stability looks like when it's built on fear. But it was predictable," another representative said. "People knew where they stood." "Yes, they stood in chains." Cassian's voice hardened, and the moment someone offered them something different, they rose up. The rebellion, the coup, the fires. All of it happened because people were tired of being stable in their suffering. Silence settled over the room. "I won't lie to you," Cassian said. "What we're building is risky. It might fail. But at least we're trying to create something where power doesn't corrupt automatically, where people have voices, where my daughter can grow up in an empire that values truth over comfortable lies." "And if we fail," someone asked, "then we fail trying to be better." Cassian met each person's eyes. "But I'd rather that than succeed at being the same kind of tyrant my father was." The council debated for hours. In the end, they voted to continue the reforms. Barely. By a margin so thin it felt more like uncertainty than support. But it was enough. For now. That night, Cassian found Seraphina in Liana's nursery. The baby was awake, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the darkness, tracking movements only she could see. "She sees him," Seraphina said quietly. "Malrek. She sees where he is. How is that possible? The hidden truth bloodline. She sees truth regardless of distance or time. And right now she's showing me where he's hiding." "Where?" "The old fortress, 3 days north, where your mother died." "Of course." Cassian's jaw clenched. "He's making this personal. It's always been personal." Seraphina adjusted Liana in her arms. "He wants you to come. Wants you to confront him where your trauma began. It's psychological warfare." "I know, but I'm going anyway." "You don't have to. We can send the army, siege him out." "No, this ends between him and me. No soldiers, no witnesses, just father and son." Seraphina grabbed his arm. "He'll try to break you, force you to become him. That's what he wants. Proof that his methods work. Then I'll prove him wrong." "How?" "By not killing him." The words hung in the air like smoke. Seraphina stared at him. "You're not serious." "I am." Cassian's expression was resolved. "Killing him makes him a martyr, makes his followers believe he was right. But if I can face him and choose mercy,
If I can look at the man who destroyed me and refuse to become him, then I win. Really win. Or he kills you. Maybe. But at least I died trying to be better. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that noble deaths were still deaths, that Liana needed a father more than she needed a moral example, that survival mattered more than principles. But she saw the determination in his eyes, the need to finally confront the monster that had shaped his entire life, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he could break free from the cycle of violence his father had started. So instead of arguing, she kissed him, hard enough to hurt, desperate enough to communicate everything words couldn't capture. "Come back to us," she whispered against his mouth. "Whatever it costs. Whatever you have to do. Come back. I will. I promise." The lie tasted like ash, but they both pretended to believe it. But Cassian rode north alone. No guards, no weapons except the sword his mother had given him the week before she died. Just a man on a horse crossing territory he'd burned during the wars. Territory where people still hated him for what he'd done. Some threw stones as he passed. Others just stared with expressions that mixed hatred and curiosity. A few offered food, because that was the thing about humans. They were complicated. Could hate someone and still show kindness. Could remember atrocities and still hope for change. Could carry grudges and forgiveness simultaneously. Cassian thought about that as he rode. Thought about all the people he'd hurt, all the villages he'd burned, all the lives he'd destroyed in service of an empire that had demanded cruelty as proof of strength. How do you come back from that? How do you look at yourself in the mirror when your hands are soaked in blood that won't wash off no matter how many reforms you pass or speeches you give? The answer, he was learning, was that you didn't. You couldn't undo the past, couldn't resurrect the dead or unburn the villages or give back the childhood stolen by violence. All you could do was acknowledge the damage and try to build something different from the wreckage. It wasn't redemption. Redemption implied you could earn forgiveness, make up for what you'd done. But some things were unforgivable. The only real question was whether you let that destroy you or whether you kept trying anyway. He reached the fortress at dawn on the third day. It stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, ancient and crumbling, abandoned after his mother's murder. Cassian hadn't been back since that night, hadn't wanted to revisit the place where his childhood died and the monster his father wanted was born. Now he stood before it again, older, scarred, carrying his own daughter's future on his shoulders. The gates were open, waiting. Cassian dismounted and walked inside. The courtyard was exactly as he remembered, overgrown with weeds, fountains dry and cracked, statues of ancient kings watching with blind stone eyes, and standing in the center, looking older but no less dangerous, was Drakhar. His father looked like death-given form, skeletal, scarred, but his eyes burned with the same intelligence and malice that had defined his reign. He smiled when he saw Cassian. "There's my boy, finally come home." Cassian stopped 10 paces away. His hand rested on his sword hilt, but didn't draw. "This isn't my home. It's a grave. Your mother's grave." Malrek's smile widened. "Does it still haunt you? The sound she made when I opened her throat? The way she reached for you even as she died?" Cassian's jaw clenched, but he didn't rise to the bait. "You wanted me here. I came. Now tell me what this is about." Malrek began to circle him slowly, like a predator assessing prey. "It's about proving I was right, that everything I did to you was necessary, that the empire you're trying to build is a fantasy destined to collapse the moment real enemies test it. The empire is stronger than it's ever been." "No, it's softer." Malrek's voice hardened. "You've replaced strength with sentiment, discipline with democracy. The old houses are questioning your authority. The military is divided. Your own council barely supports you. That's not strength. That's weakness waiting to be exploited. Or it's an empire learning to survive without tyranny holding it together. There's no difference." Malrek stopped circling. "Power is power. Either you hold it through force or someone takes it from you. Your compassion, your reforms, your precious family, they're all liabilities." "No, they're what make it worth protecting," Malrek laughed. It was the sound Cassian remembered from childhood, cold, mocking, designed to cut deeper than blades. "You really believe that, don't you? You think love makes you stronger,
That caring about people gives you purpose, but all it does is give your enemies leverage. Tell me, boy, what would you do if I threatened that monster child of yours? If I stood over her cradle with a blade and told you to surrender or watch her die?" Cassian's hand tightened on his sword. "You'll never get close enough to find out, because you've surrounded yourself with guards, fortified the palace, set up all your little systems." Malrek stepped closer. "None of that matters, because you know what I know, what I taught you, that if you want to kill someone badly enough, you find a way. Guards sleep, systems fail, and the only real protection is being terrifying enough that no one dares try. Then why haven't you?" Cassian met his father's eyes. "If you're so certain I'm weak, if my family is such an easy target, why waste time with declarations and psychological games? Why not just attack?" Malrek's expression flickered, just for a moment. And Cassian saw the truth. "Because you're afraid." The words landed like blows. "You're afraid that killing us proves nothing except that you're still the same monster you've always been. You're afraid that the Empire has actually changed, that people are choosing the new way over the old one, that maybe, just maybe, I was right and you were wrong." Malrek's face twisted. "I'm not afraid of anything." "Yes, you are." Cassian took a step closer. "You're afraid of being irrelevant, of dying knowing that everything you built was destroyed by your own son, of facing the truth that cruelty doesn't create strength, it just creates more cruelty." "Shut up. You're afraid that I'm succeeding where you failed, that I'm building something that will outlast me, that my daughter will grow up in an empire that doesn't worship violence as virtue." I said, "Shut up." "You're afraid that I'm happy, that despite everything you did to me, I found love, found purpose, found a reason to be better than what you made me." Malrek's control shattered. He moved faster than a man his age should be able to, drawing a blade and lunging with decades of muscle memory guiding the strike. Cassian blocked it. Their swords met with a sound like thunder. They fought across the courtyard, father against son, old violence against new purpose. Every strike carried weight beyond the physical, carried years of abuse and trauma and desperate attempts to break free. Malrek fought like a man who had nothing to lose, who had already decided that destroying his son was worth dying for. His strikes were brutal, efficient, designed to cripple and maim. Cassian fought differently, defensively, redirecting instead of attacking, looking for openings to disarm rather than kill, because that was the difference between them. Malrek fought to prove he was right. Cassian fought to prove he was better. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Both men bloodied, both breathing hard, both knowing this would end only one way. Finally, Cassian saw his opening. He caught his father's blade on a high guard, twisted, and disarmed him with a move his mother had taught him before she died. Malrek's sword clattered across the courtyard. Cassian's blade pressed against his father's throat. They stood frozen, both knowing that one movement would end it. "Do it," Malrek gasped. "Prove I was right. Prove that violence is the only real answer. Kill me and become exactly what I made you." Cassian's hand shook. Every instinct screamed at him to finish it, to end the threat, to make sure this monster could never hurt anyone again. But then he thought about Seraphina, about Liana, about the empire he was trying to build, about the man he wanted to be versus the weapon his father had forged, and he lowered his sword. "No." Malrek stared at him in disbelief. "What? I'm not going to kill you." Cassian stepped back. "I'm not going to give you what you want. You spent my entire life trying to prove that cruelty is strength, that monsters can't change, that the only way to survive is to become like you, and I refuse to prove you right. Then you're weak. Maybe. But I'm free. And you're still chained to the belief that violence is the only truth that matters." Malrek's face twisted with rage and something else, something that looked almost like grief. "You think mercy makes you noble? It just makes you vulnerable." "No. It makes me different, and that difference is what will let me sleep at night knowing my daughter won't grow up with a father who solved every problem by killing it." Cassian turned and walked toward his horse. Behind him, Malrek screamed, "You can't just leave me here! You can't—" "Yes, I can." Cassian didn't look back. "Guards are coming to take you into custody. You'll stand trial, face justice, and then you'll spend whatever life you have left in a cell watching the empire you tried to destroy become better than you ever believed it could be. I'll escape,
I'll come for you. Malrek's voice cut off. Cassian turned. His father had collapsed, clutching his chest, face pale. The exertion of the fight combined with years of imprisonment and age catching up all at once. Cassian rushed back, knelt beside him. Even now, even after everything, some part of him couldn't watch his father die without trying to help. Malrek grabbed his arm. His grip was weak but desperate. His voice came out as a wheeze. I made you strong. Everything you are. I made you. No. Cassian's voice was gentle. You broke me. Mom made me strong by showing me there was something worth protecting. Seraphina made me strong by believing I could be better. Liana makes me strong by giving me a reason to try. Malrek's eyes were fading, but I taught you to survive. You taught me to fear. There's a difference. The old king's breathing grew shallow. His hand fell away from Cassian's arm, and for just a moment his expression shifted. The rage faded, the malice dimmed, and what was left looked almost human. Did you ever love me? Malrek whispered. Even a little? Cassian felt something crack inside his chest. Not in anger, in grief for what could have been, for the father he might have had if Malrek had chosen differently, for the childhood stolen by a man too broken to see he was destroying the one person who might have saved him. I wanted to, Cassian said, every day. I wanted you to be someone I could love, but you never let me. I'm sorry. The words were so quiet Cassian almost missed them. But they were there, real, a confession extracted not by force, but by the approach of death. Malrek Drakhar died with his son holding his hand, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement that they had both been damaged by a cycle of violence neither of them started but both had perpetuated in their own ways. Cassian sat there for a long time, holding the hand of the man who had destroyed him, feeling the weight of decades of abuse and trauma and desperate attempts to break free, mourning not the man Malrek was, but the man he could have been if he'd chosen love over fear. The guards arrived an hour later and found their king sitting beside his father's corpse, tears streaming down his face, finally grieving the childhood he never got to have. But the funeral was private. No state ceremony, no crowds, just Cassian and Seraphina and a handful of people who had known Malrek before he became a monster. They buried him beside Cassian's mother, not because he deserved to be near her, but because Cassian wanted them both laid to rest, wanted to close that chapter of his life completely. At the grave, Seraphina asked quietly, Do you regret letting him die without killing him? Cassian shook his head. No, because killing him would have meant he won, would have proved that violence was the only answer. This way, I broke the cycle. Did you, though? Her voice was gentle. Or did you just delay it? Maybe both. But at least I tried. That night, Cassian stood in Liana's nursery watching his daughter sleep. She looked peaceful, innocent, unaware of the empire of violence and reformation she'd been born into. Seraphina joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. What are you thinking? That I don't want her to carry what I carry? The trauma, the fear, the constant wondering if I'm going to become my father. You won't. How do you know? Because you're afraid you will. That fear is what keeps you trying to be better. Malrek never had that. He was certain he was right. That certainty is what made him dangerous. Cassian turned to face her. What if I make mistakes? What if I damage her the way I was damaged? Then we fix them. Together. We apologize. We learn. We show her that parents are human and humans are imperfect, but love means trying anyway. It sounds exhausting. It is. But it's also the only way forward. They stood in comfortable silence, both watching their daughter breathe, both knowing that the empire they were building was fragile and uncertain and might still collapse under the weight of its own ambitions. But at least they were trying. At least they had chosen hope over certainty. At least they believed the future could be different from the past. That was enough. For now. 5 years later, the empire looked different. The representative council had real power. Territories governed themselves with oversight instead of oppression. Schools taught critical thinking alongside history. The military was restructured to prevent any single commander from staging a coup. It wasn't perfect. Nothing that big ever was.
There were still corruption cases, still power struggles, still nobles who resented losing privilege. But it was better, measurably, provably better. Cassian stood on the palace balcony watching the city bustle with life, markets thriving, people laughing, children playing in squares that used to be execution grounds. Seraphina joined him, her silver marks glowing faintly in the afternoon sun. Liana held her hand, no longer an infant, but a small child with her father's jaw and her mother's knowing eyes. The little girl looked up at Cassian. "Papa, is it true you used to burn cities?" Cassian knelt to her level. "Yes. I did terrible things when I was younger." "Why?" "Because I was afraid. And I thought being scary was the only way to stay safe." "Are you still afraid?" "Every day. But now I'm afraid of different things." "Like what?" "Like becoming someone you'd be ashamed of. Like building an empire that doesn't deserve to survive. Like forgetting that power is responsibility, not privilege." Liana considered this with the seriousness only children possess. "When I grow up, will I have to be scary too?" "No." Cassian pulled her close. "You get to be whoever you want. Kind, strong, complicated, all of it. The only thing I ask is that you try to be honest, with yourself and with others. Even when it's hard?" "Especially when it's hard." The child nodded solemnly, then looked at her mother. "Mama, do you think the empire will last?" Seraphina smiled. "I don't know. But I think if enough people believe it's worth protecting, it will survive long enough to become something new. What if they don't believe? Then we keep trying to show them it's possible. That's all anyone can do." Liana seemed satisfied with that